Testing, testing. Michelle, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Good morning, everyone. The time is now 9 a.m. So we are going to get started with today's webinar, Building Resiliency. So my name is Cassandra Kovach, and I am the Public Information Officer for the Westmoreland County Department of Public Safety. So I'll kind of be guiding us through today's webinar, but thank you everyone for joining us. We're very excited for today's presenters and to be able to present this information to each of you. So just a few housekeeping items. Everyone already is muted, so thank you very much. But if you could just stay muted, we would greatly appreciate it. At the end of each presentation, we will open it up for questions. So please feel free to unmute yourself at that time to ask any questions, as well as utilize the chat box for anything you may need. But at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Director Mertz for some opening remarks. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. I want to first of all thank everybody for joining us. We usually put these off in person down at the college, and which always comes with a great meal that they have down there for us. But unfortunately, with how things are with the COVID and everything else, we felt it was best way to handle it this year was virtually. And I think we're going to have a good turnout there. Hats off to our planning section, Chief Tantlinger and Cass and Michelle and everybody for putting all this together because I think that they came up with a great line of speakers for us today, giving us an opportunity to learn more and build our resilience as it's headed going into the future. And hopefully you're going to come out with, if anything out of the end of this is that we're all in this together at all lines of government, private sector, public sector, and we're all in this together moving forward, handling the threats and the risks that we see. So with that, I truly appreciate everybody's attendance. I realize it's going to be a long day, and if you have to step away and come back, that's fine. But it's great that you're all here today and part of this. With that, Cass, are we ready for our first speaker?
Yes, we are. So if you're following along on the agenda, our first speaker is going to be Director Randy Padfield from the Pennsylvania Emergency Management Agency. Director Padfield has more than 30 years of experience in emergency services delivery and training, including fire rescue, emergency medical services, and emergency management and incident management disciplines. Prior to his tenure at PEMA as Deputy Director for Response, he was the Director of the Public Safety Training Center at Harrisburg Area Community College. Mr. Padfield is also a member of the Pennsylvania Task Force 1 Urban Search and Rescue Team. He has been involved in multiple local, regional, state, and federal responses throughout his career. He is a certified fire service instructor through the Office of the State Fire Commissioner and a contract instructor for the National Fire Academy and Emergency Management Institute. He is a certified flight paramedic and has worked as a per diem flight paramedic for the Milton S. Hershey Medical Center Lifeline Critical Care Transport Program for more than 20 years. He is a native of St. Clair, Schuylkill County, and lives in Cumberland County with his wife and 2 children. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Director Randy Padfield.
Thank you very much, Cassandra. I take it everybody can hear me okay?
Yes, we're good. Thank you.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks, bud. So let's see if I can share my screen. And let me see if I can get this up. Are you able to see my screen at all, Cassandra, bud?
Yeah,
Not
good.
yet.
I'm sorry?
We are not able to see it yet.
Okay. Let me try. I'm having some challenges with, Hang on, let me,
I able to see it on the side by side.
okay, let me try something else. Bring it up. How does that work?
Yes, we are able to see that.
Okay, wonderful. Unfortunately, we have a lot of different technology platforms, and trying to get them all to work some days is a challenge. So first of all, I'd like to thank Cassandra and actually Director Mertz for the opportunity to be able to present, to be able to talk about resiliency. I think, it's really critical to what we do in emergency management. And I think, having a good understanding of what resiliency really is key kind of moving forward. So I'm going to center my remarks around, what resiliency is. I'm going to talk about some tools that are available out there, and then maybe some focus areas for emergency management to be able to really take a look at, because there are some things that are within our sphere of influence as emergency managers, and there are things that are without or outside of our sphere of influence when it comes to resiliency. And we just have to be aware of, they may be factors that we can influence, but they're also factors that we need to evaluate, and we need to look at data to try to lead us down the road of things that we may want to push on in our individual counties or our municipalities to be able to build a more resilient infrastructure, to build a more resilient population, to be able to bounce back from future disasters. So I think that's really key. And part of it is starting this conversation. And I'll relay some of my thoughts actually from the most recent disaster that we're dealing with, which is kind of the impacts from Ida, especially in the Southeast, and some of the things that we've seen down there. So again, defining resiliency is really key. And I think everybody understands what it is, but it's really the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties, or, the ability of the community to be able to come back. And that could be individuals, it could be the business community, whatever that happens to be. In our world, resilient residents, communities, and businesses weather the effects of disasters. We all know this, and other emergencies better than those that are less resilient and recover faster with less need for support, especially from the emergency management community. And building a culture of resiliency lessens the level of support needed sometimes in the immediate post-incident recovery phase. And I'll kind of relay a story of something that we saw out of Ida so far. So I had the opportunity to be able to go to Montgomery County and tour some of the areas that were impacted by Ida. One of the areas that we toured was in Bridgeport Borough. And when we showed up there, it was only a couple of days post the impact, and there was significant flooding. It was historic on the Schuylkill, flooding like they've never seen there before. And it was really record flooding for that area. When we toured the area that was impacted down in the floodplain, there was one dumpster that was still on the street that was full. Everything else was cleaned up. All the drywall was ripped out of the houses. And talking to a lot of the residents, a lot of this was because of community support and leveraging the community support, community social networks, those types of things, and community organizations to be able to assist that and surge that over the previous weekend once the water went down. Contrast that to just going over the bridge into Norristown, and it was a much different operation there. There's still a lot of debris at the curb level. There's still a lot of other things that need to be taken care of. And it was, a real good kind of dichotomy of what happens when you have good resilient communities, you have buy-in from multiple levels, including all levels of government, you have the social networks, you have the organizations that are willing to be able to help individuals recover. And then on the opposite side, maybe that's not necessarily the case, and that recovery is prolonged. And I think that, that really goes back to some of the factors that we're going to talk about when it comes to resiliency. And some of them are within our, like I said, sphere of influence and things that we can nudge, and other things maybe not so much so. So I think that's one of the things to kind of keep in mind as we move forward, is really, from our perspective of emergency managers or public safety response professionals, things like that, understanding what some of these factors are, understanding how they interplay with other factors, and understanding how we can build our plans around some of this and actually, be better prepared. So again, resiliency involves several factors. It's just not preparedness. A lot of things, a lot of times we look at it and say, well, this is all preparedness related. but it really includes kind of the whole gamut. It takes a look at really mitigation. It takes a look at insurance and making sure people understand their hazards and can insure against their hazards appropriately if they have the ability to be able to do that. It takes a look at continuity and continuity planning for businesses and organizations that may be affected by disasters. We know that those that have good intact continuity plans recover much faster than those that don't. And really, that's something from an emergency management perspective we can influence by having good business relations and public-private partnerships and those types of things to be able to really bolster that during times of an emergency or a disaster. And also takes a look at grants and funding as well. And there are other factors. From a grants and funding perspective, we have the availability of, a lot of preparedness grants. It's really understanding what's the best fit for those preparedness grants and what are the best pots of money to be able to move some of this. Very similar to, mitigation grants as well. When we take a look at the building resilient infrastructures and community grants that FEMA has, they're critical because they're going to be a game changer. But what we saw in the first round is that the ones that were competitively released and the successful projects were ones that built to the best standards at the time. They were already projects that had economic development funds at the state level or at the local level already allotted. They already had significant impacts. And there's some of the things that we'll talk about a little later on, is that we have to kind of get out of the mentality of building to the minimum standard. And we'll talk a little bit about that again. I'll go back to kind of an example from Bridgeport in talking to some of the folks down there. We need to have an awareness of community vulnerabilities to adequately plan. So each community is different, each population is different, and to be able to work towards that goal of resiliency and building resiliency, we need to understand what those variables are, how they play together, certain things that we need to take into consideration from a planning perspective, and consideration of factors that can be influenced versus those that can't be influenced. There are some greater factors that we just at our level may not be able to influence, but we need to understand that they do impact a community's resiliency. Many of the factors that determine resiliency of a community fall outside the sphere of our influence. Some of that is income inequality, education level of the community, percent of the community that's unemployed, percent of owner-occupied housing. All of these other things are good indicators on whether a community is going to be more resilient or less resilient. So these are all things that we kind of have to think through that we may not directly influence, but actually play into the resiliency of any one of the communities that we service on a regular basis. So when we take a look at community resilience indicators, there are a number of them out there, and I don't want to go through every one of them, but I think we need to kind of, take a look at these from an emergency management perspective and understand, how they play into building the resiliency of the community or lack of resiliency of the community, and I'll just kind of point out, some of these, when we take a look at, mobility of the population, those individuals that have access to vehicles that are mobile, that we have intact mass transit systems and those types of things is really key to having the recovery. If people's vehicles are damaged during the disaster, if they don't have vehicles to start with, their mobility is less, and that potentially creates more challenges and more services that we have to provide to them post-disaster. Population that's covered by health insurance. Obviously, if we have a large portion of the population are covered by health insurance, that's always good. If we have a lesser percentage that's covered by health insurance, that's a significant indicator that there's going to be more assistance needed post-disaster if folks are not, their health status isn't where it should be, and they don't have access to be able to do the things they need to do to take care of their own health. There are a number of other factors. When we take a look at percentage of individuals living with disabilities within any one community, there are going to be folks that require additional services. We need to know where they're at, where they're located, and we need to be able to be prepared for that, to be able to provide them the services that they need post-disaster. The unemployment rate, there are a lot of these things that are really population focused. And there are a lot of other factors that we need to take a look at as well. So these are just some of the things, and you can take a look at these and you can understand that from an emergency management perspective, there's not a lot sometimes we can influence here, but understanding what these resiliency indicators happen to be, we can better prepare for the impact of disasters to these communities when we look at some of these. And we understand that, some of these were in pretty good shape, and others we may not be in good shape in the community. And we have to really focus our planning efforts on those and being able to service those in most need after an incident. There's also community-focused factors that we take a look at. So community-focused factors are hospital capacity and access to healthcare, medical professionals, and services. If the hospitals are impacted, that's going to impact the population's ability to be able to get the adequate healthcare services that they need. But if we already have, especially in rural Pennsylvania, lack of healthcare that is available, that is only going to be exacerbated during a disaster, and something that we need to seriously think about. Religious affiliation is key. The folks that are, have some sort of, that are practicing a specific religion, they have better social ties a lot of times through those organizations. The same thing when we take a look at connection to civic and social organizations. The more ties they have to those organizations usually stand up during times of disasters. They provide a social network for those individuals. They help. It's very cathartic from a crisis counseling perspective, that they have somebody to go to. They can rely on those organizations and the folks that make up those organizations. So if there's a tightly knit civic or social organizational group within the community, usually those communities are going to be able to recover faster because they have the ability, and they're going to be more resilient because they have the ability to be able to leverage those organizations. When we take a look at, and this is one of the things we're dealing with in the Southeast right now, is rental property capacity. That's really key, especially when you look at a number of people that are displaced and you take a look at a highly, a suburban environment that has a lot of population density. We don't necessarily have the rental property capacity that we may need, because some of these individuals that have been impacted by the remnants of Ida are going to be displaced for longer periods of time. So these are all things that take into consideration. We identified this early on and stood up a housing task force within the first couple of days, because we knew housing is going to be the most complex issue that we're going to deal with in some of the collar counties around Philadelphia. And we really need to start to try to solve that problem now. And many of these are going to be individual needs. There's no one solution that is going to work for everyone, because everyone has individual circumstances and variables. Again, hotel capacity, taking a look at the ability for transitional shelter, and using those types of mechanisms to be able to provide transitional shelter to people. So these are all kind of community resilience indicators. When we take a look at, some of these, there are a lot of others as well, but understanding how they interplay with each other and understanding how they affect the resiliency of any one community. And it could be a township, a borough, municipality, or it could be much larger. It could be a city, it could be half of a county, whatever that happens to be. Understanding how these population focus and community resilience indicators really play into the resiliency of any one community. And from an emergency management perspective, it's critical that we understand these and that we have the data available to us to be able to make good informed decisions, to be able to focus really our planning efforts of building the resiliency in our own communities as we kind of move forward. There are a number of planning tools that are out there, and I'll kind of talk and hit really two of them that I really want to kind of go over. And I'm not going to be able to do either one of them justice. FEMA actually has what's called the Resilience Analysis and Planning Tool, or RAPT tool. We looked at this a number of years ago, and it was good a number of years ago. And actually, in preparation for this presentation, I went back through and took a better look at it. And they've over the last 2 years, they've actually added a lot more functionality to this tool. So the data is provided for 20 resiliency indicators, or resilience indicators. And a lot of them I just previously went over in the other two slides. These are open source data sets that are available, that are updated on a regular basis. It takes a look at population. It takes a look at a lot of other things. 12 of the data sets are aggregated to census tracts within the county. So you can turn on census tracts within your county and take a look at the data sets aggregated down to the census tract to give you kind of more of a micro picture as opposed to a macro picture. Like I said, they're commonly used in updated data sets, and there's multiple other data sets that are available. The one good thing about this tool that it provides you the ability to do is actually import other data that is county or community specific. So through the online tool, if you have a CSV file, if you have a shape file, if you have any other data source that you want to display over top of the data sources, the 20 data sources that are available, you have the ability to be able to do that and to be able to see, relational data for either in a micro view or more of a macro view to be able to assist you in your planning efforts. And, those things you want to nudge or you want to influence to kind of increase the resiliency within your communities. So these data sets are used to help the planners identify communities that will most likely need support. And, or actually the next one is, sorry, I missed that, the CDC Social Vulnerability Index. We heard a lot of this. This is another tool, and I just wanted to kind of hit on this. We've used this a lot during COVID, but it also takes a look at some of the same data, but some different data sets as well. So the data sets that are used for the SVI help planners to identify communities that will most likely need support. And this is, after a disaster, and it could be anything from a pandemic, but it could be a natural disaster as well, or a technological disaster or human-caused disaster. The SVI uses 15 social factors grouped into 4 themes: socioeconomic status. These are the 4 themes: socioeconomic status, household composition, race and ethnicity, and language, and housing and transportation. And it's just a different way of looking at it. And what you'll see is there's not sometimes correlation between the FEMA RAP tool and sometimes the SVI tool that's available. And the reason being is they're looking at some different data sets as well. And we'll kind of talk a little bit about that because data is data. So you have to understand where the data is coming from and actually what the data is telling you to be able to kind of guide your efforts accordingly. So this is an example of the FEMA RAP tool, and I just brought up Westmoreland County. And one of the things that you'll see is it gives you a relative resilience in the county compared to other counties. So 0.35, and we'll kind of talk about that. That's actually on a much better side when you take a look at counties across Pennsylvania. So, I really welcome folks to go into this tool and take a look at it, but also not to focus on what the relative resiliency rating happens to be, but more focus on the data that is available and interpreting the data sets that are available to help you guide your planning efforts when it comes to building resiliency. The other thing that it will give you, so this is kind of the macro view of where Westmoreland County's relative resilience happens to be. But when you pull that up further, the indicators are listed in here. So you take a look at those 20 indicators that I talked about, and those common indicators are in there. So you can see that the percent age over 65 is about 22%, percent with a disability is about 15.5%, percent without a high school diploma is about 5.62. So you can see all of these indicators, and you can use this data to be able to help you inform some of your planning efforts to be able to increase the resiliency in certain areas, or also to be able to plan for some of the services that may be needed to be able to hasten recovery after a significant disaster. So, this is kind of just a real quick snapshot. There are a lot of other data sets in there. You can take a look at the data sets independently, but you can also take a look at the data sets in their totality and how it applies to your jurisdiction, either the county or sometimes down to the census tract as well within the county. This is a snapshot of the CDC's SVI tool. And again, people think that, well, it's kind of compiled by the CDC, so it's more health related. It is to a certain degree, but we can actually use this to be able to inform some of our decisions on resiliency and some of our planning efforts and those types of things. So it's that those 4 groupings on the left are the socioeconomic status, and you can see the variables, the household composition and disability. You can see the variables that go in there, or the data sets, minority status and language, and then the housing type and transportation. And then that usually equates to, again, an overall SVI score that the county could get, but it's also driven down. You can download the information for individual municipalities and census tracts and those types of things. So again, just a very quick overview of 2 tools that happen to be available to be able to guide some of our efforts when we start talking about resiliency and moving towards resiliency. So just a couple of takeaways to kind of round this out. I appreciate, again, the time to be able to discuss this, because I think, this is where we really need to move public safety emergency management to be able to talk about resiliency and not just preparedness when it comes to this. So increasing resiliency, is a complex and multifactorial issue. All right. And, we talk about common operating picture, and, I equate that to kind of like searching for the magic unicorn. We heard they exist. We heard they're out there, but nobody's ever seen one. So it's the same thing with resiliency. We use this as a buzzword, but we need to understand what this means to us. And we need to understand how deep the discussion needs to go when it comes to resiliency. Understanding the factors that influence the individual and community resiliency is key to planning, preparedness, response, recovery, and mitigation initiatives within each one of our communities to be able to lessen the impacts of future disasters and to be able to make sure that people can recover in a timely fashion. No two individuals or communities are exactly alike when it comes to resiliency. And, we need to focus more on the data and not the ratings. You saw in some of those tools what the ratings happen to be. The ratings are good. And you can compare the ratings to other counties, but understand that all the data that goes into those ratings is going to be different amongst those counties. So I'm not too worried about the ratings. I'm more worried about what the data sets are telling me when I look at those data sets. And then focus on building a culture of resilience. And we have to think differently about resilience and think differently about what we're doing. And I'll kind of leave it with an example from Bridgeport back in Montgomery County. So we were down there, we toured the damage. I talked to one of the homeowners, and he owned a fair amount of properties in the flood damaged areas. And he pointed across the street to a large open lot. And he says, there are going to be 400 townhomes that are approved to be built on that lot within the floodplain. He says those townhomes will be built at 2 feet above base flood elevation. He says this was a historic flood. And he says those would have flooded, those 400 townhomes that are destined to be built in that area. And he says, that's my concern. And when you look at it, FEMA will take, a while to be able to update their flood maps. The base flood elevations will take a while to be updated. And by the time those townhouses are built, they will, be built to, the ordinance at the time, when really that is a minimum standard. And if we really want to be a resilient community, we should look at exceeding those base standards or those minimum standards and really build to the future in mind, understanding that climate change is affecting what we're doing. And ultimately, you're either paying the money on the front end or you're paying it on the back end with a lot more consequences when individuals living in these communities are impacted by these disasters. So I kind of want to leave with that. Again, I thank everybody for the opportunity to be able to speak today on resiliency, something that we're really passionate about. And we really want to kind of promote this across the spectrum. And Cassandra, I'll turn it back over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director Padfield. At this time, I will open it up. If anyone who's in attendance has any questions for Director Padfield, we will give a minute or two. Please feel free to use the chat or to unmute yourself.
Director Padfield, this is Chris Tantlinger. A couple of questions that I had is there a tool similar to RAP for critical infrastructure that gives some of the data sets related to that? And what's your thoughts on the community lifelines being used as a way to direct some planning efforts? I know it's more about the response side, but those are the two things.
Yeah, Chris, they're very good questions. Number one, I'll start off with the kind of the latter question. Community lifelines, I think that is critical to the focus area. So I think using those and understanding, all the interplay, as everybody's aware, there are a lot of interrelated variables when you look at the lifelines. So, I think that is key. So you can look at it like that. And I think that's a good starting point when you take a look at resiliency, when we take a look at supply chain resiliency and all the other factors that play into that. So I think that's another good tool to utilize to kind of put it in context and scope the discussion. The RAP tool is rather interesting. So if you go into the RAP tool, you have the ability for an incident to put an incident location in. And there is an infrastructure database that is in there. So you can actually go in and drop whatever the incident happens to be, put it at a point source, put a buffer around that, and it will bring up critical infrastructure. You can check off the critical infrastructure. So if you're looking for dialysis centers, you're looking for hospitals, you're looking for fire stations, you're looking for other pieces of critical infrastructure, it gives you the ability to display that and then download that based on the database. Now, one of the things we were talking about here is we have a state level of critical infrastructure and that data, and that's tightly controlled, obviously. But there is a way that if you have a community level critical infrastructure database or a county level critical infrastructure database, to be able to pull that in and actually display that. So actually what I was doing in preparation for this yesterday is I pulled in some of the SVI data that is downloadable in a CSV format and pulled it into the wrap tool and displayed it in the wrap tool. So I think, some of that is resident within that wrap tool. It may not be to the degree that we need it, but there's a number of critical infrastructure categories in there that you can check off and pull that information up to be able to see within the range, ring, or the buffer of any incident or a community, what exists in there, the locations. It goes down to pharmacies. It goes down to a lot of other things we in emergency management would be kind of honed in on post-disaster. So I think that exists. I think there's a lot more work that needs to be done, though, with the critical infrastructure side of the house as well.
Thanks, Randy. And the SVI tool is really helpful when we were putting together our community vaccination to get to those that were underserved. So we appreciate that. Thank you.
Alrighty, we did have one more question in the chat box, just asking if the links to the data will be provided in an email afterwards. And we will make sure that we provide the recording for the whole webinar, as well as some of those links to the data in a follow-up email. So thank you very much. And once again, Director Padfield, we thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us. You are more than welcome to stay on if you would like for the remainder, but we do understand you have important things to tend to. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the opportunity again. It was good seeing everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All righty. So following right along with the agenda, next up we have the presentation, If Not You, Then Who? And that's kind of an inside scoop into COAD. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Courtney McBride. Courtney is our administrative assistant and assistant PIO for the Department of Public Safety. She's a 2018 graduate of Clarion University, where she studied communications and journalism. She's lived in Westmoreland County for 3 years. Before that, living in York County for 14 years. And Courtney has been with the Department of Public Safety since January of this year. So give me one moment and I will go ahead and allow Courtney to share her screen. Okay, Courtney, you should now have access. So we'll give you a few minutes to get your presentation pulled up and then we will be ready to go.
Okay, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I'm trying to get the video on. It doesn't seem to be popping up.
Try now. I had to stop sharing my screen. I apologize. Bear with us, everyone. The joys of technology. Every platform's different, so sometimes it's an adjustment. But just give us a few minutes and then we will get her presentation brought up. So in the meantime, while they are getting her presentation pulled up, I would like to let everyone know that we do have a break scheduled for in the morning, about mid-morning, a lunch break scheduled, as well as a break in the afternoon. So please feel free at any time to get up and move around if you have to, and make sure you have your coffee with you today. It is National Coffee Day, so perfect day for it. But it looks like she's just about getting that pulled up now.
Can you guys see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I apologize if you can't see me. We played around with the camera. I think I was just able to screen share, but not see me for some reason. Well, good morning, everyone. I'm going to apologize in advance if I cough at all. I am getting over a cold, so I'm going to try not to do that. So this is titled, If Not You, Then Who? I actually heard that through something else. It possibly would have been a speech or something. I think that just resonates with COAD, giving kind of like a notice to the community, letting them know if someone does not go out and volunteer, who else is going to do it, and just kind of give them that thought of this could be anyone in our family, our next door neighbor, and it's how important it is to be prepared and have resources ready for yourself. So what is COAD? For anyone who does not know, it's Community Organizations Active in Disaster. Traditionally a non-operational network that exists for communication, collaboration, cooperation, coordination, and compassion. Compassion was actually the 5th C that was added possibly recently. COAD groups never deploy themselves. They have to be asked to volunteer at a spot of a disaster, and they are available for a long-term recovery process. So the difference between COAD and VOAD is really just the first word. C is community, and then organizations active in disaster, and those service counties and more local jurisdiction. And VOAD is voluntary organizations active in disaster, which is primarily used by the national and state level. So a lot more larger groups. COAD is, essentially for small communities, kind of like what we're doing here within our county directly. So just broken down, collaboration is obviously working with others to produce or create. Cooperation is working together to reach the same goal. Communication is exchanging information or news clearly. Coordination is different elements coming together, blending. And compassion, the most recent one added, is showing sympathy for others' misfortunes, which is the whole reason of COAD. Like I said in the beginning with the title, if this group of people do not go out and volunteer, who is going to be there for them when they don't have other resources or other government assistance available to them? So the mission statement for Westmoreland County is designed to prepare for, mitigate, and recover from disasters through the collaboration of volunteers. The COAD's role is to bring organizations together to enable them to understand each other and work together during times of disaster, preparedness, response, relief, and recovery. So we chose COAD for Westmoreland versus VOAD because, like I said before, we're really focused on staying within our county. Of course, if something happened outside of the county and we were asked to service them as well, of course we would do it. But it's just more focused on local community. And because of the relationship we already have formed with our Human Services Committee within the county as well. So some examples of what COAD does: participating in two-way communication, attending orientations and trainings as required, provide honest feedback and of program functions, understand and respect the chain of command, ensure that all needs are met in the time of a disaster. And again, like I said earlier, activate only when requested to do so. So long-term recovery, this isn't for every group. I believe this is more notion towards VOAD organizations, but the long-term recovery process is where actual rebuilding of homes and lives occur. This is needed when personal resources, insurance, or government grants or loans are insufficient to meet a family's needs. And to tie in along with that, I don't think a lot of people in the community even know what is available to them. Just daily sitting here at my phone, I get a lot of questions from people in the community that they would never know if they didn't call. And sometimes I can't always help them and I have to reroute them to someone else. But there's a lot of things that people don't know about that they have access to. Just yesterday, I made my first, I can't think of the word. I made my first suggestion, there it is, to for someone to call 211 for assistance with something. And they had no idea that that was even an option to them. So the goal for a long-term recovery is to help families affected reach a new normal. So you have to put it in perspective, let them understand that it's not going to go back to the way it was before, you know, their home was burned down or there was a flood. Everything's going to change after that. It could be okay, but it's not going to be the way it was previously. So a little bit about becoming a recognized long-term recovery group. To be recognized by National VOAD, there's a few components. Have to have a name for the group, a board of directors, such as an administrative team and committee chairs, a mission statement, bylaws, and a fiscal sponsor. So membership criteria is divided into national members, state members, and partners. And it's subdivided into two categories, national membership and associate membership. And to be considered national, you must have been activated or deployed to 3 presidentially declared disasters within the last 3 years. Currently or actively be a participating member of 5 state or territory VOADs. And your organization must have a total budget of at least 1 million or a total number of staff and volunteers in excess of 300 people. And to be considered an associate member, you must have a collaborative desire to strengthen the VOAD movement. So really just have the want to be there and help. Proven national disaster mission and capacity, and had an IRS tax exempt status for the last 2 years prior to membership application. So who can help is really anyone. Something I found when I was researching more on the VOAD side is a volunteer tracking center. This is usually set up at very large disaster sites. I don't know how many staff they staff it with. I guess it depends on the size of the disaster, but it's basically a group of people that track all of the volunteer hours, who specifically the volunteers are, where they're at, what they're going to be doing, where they should not be. I believe it depends on the skill set of what the volunteers can offer, of where they would be placed at a certain disaster, what specifically they would be doing. So a volunteer tracking center is considered an essential thing with a large disaster cleanup. And recruiting younger volunteers is essential because everyone is getting older and there's older volunteers that they just don't have the capacity anymore, mentally, or especially physically, to carry out volunteer stuff. So it's important to get it out there in community, and especially with the younger crowd, you know, to let them know that it's not just something that's going to look great on their resume or volunteer hours for college, but do it because they want to. And like I said earlier, you never know who it's going to be. It could be your next door neighbor, your best friend. So I think it's important to put it into perspective for the younger people to understand what they could really do and what impact they could have. And in a natural disaster situation, there are 3 things that help greatly. They call them the 3 M's: money, muscle, and materials. And that all could not be more true. So here are COAD resources specifically within our county. There's 211, United Way, the American Red Cross, Union Mission, Westmoreland Community Action, Feeding the Spirit, the Primary Health Network, Westmoreland Food Bank, Westmoreland Case Management and Supports Incorporated, Veterans Leadership Program, Disability Options Network, and Area Agency on Aging. So I'm not going to read all this word for word, but this is the Human Services Committee defined. It explains what they do. I'll read a few of them. 211 connects you to a specialist to find resources within your community. From what I researched and have watched videos on, it's someone sitting at a desk with a headset, and it seems very similar to 911, but it's non-emergency. So really you can call them for just about anything, and they're trained to find exactly what you need. Union Mission offers connections to emergency shelters. That would be great with any disaster relief. Feeding the Spirit addresses human crisis and provides long-term solutions by reducing barriers to housing, employment, and food security. And Disability Options Network empowers people with disabilities to live as independently as they choose. So these are some of the national VOAD partners. There's probably more than this. This is what I pulled directly from their main website. So these are probably the most recent ones. So a little bit more about some of those that I could find that was really cool that I'd never known about. So Airbnb is one of their partners. Hosts that rent out a house or an apartment or whatever it is, they are actually allowed to donate their rental property to people who need it in a crisis. If something happened to their home, or if they're just homeless and they need somewhere to go, hosts can actually donate their space for free, which I had never heard of before. This company called Airlink, it's actually a cargo plane company. They provided transportation to 256 first responders to volunteer in the relief efforts of the recent Hurricane Ida destruction. And they actually teamed up with Operation Barbecue Relief and United Airlines. And the Gap Foundation, which was founded by Doris and Dawn Fisher in 1977. It was started 8 years after the first Gap clothing store opened. So Gap employees spend a lot of time volunteering, which again, I would have never known if I wouldn't have dug into this. In the last year, in 2020, they had over 450,000 hours in volunteering. And that's just things like donation drives, mentoring children, I'm sure food drives, anything volunteer-wise. They are extremely involved inside of work and outside of work. And in 2020, the company Good 360 was able to distribute more than $870 million worth of essential personal and household products to families who are affected by job and income loss during the height of the pandemic. And this reached 7.5 million people that was able to assist. So a little history on VOAD. It was founded over 50 years ago following the devastation of Hurricane Camille. Hurricane Camille started as a Category 2 hurricane, and in the days that it hit, reached a Category 5 when it struck the Gulf Coast in 1969. And before VOAD was formed, numerous governmental, private sector, and nonprofit organizations served disaster survivors independently. So there were groups in place before VOAD, but when Camille struck, that's when they all kind of looked at each other and realized, wow, we need something bigger to prepare because we were not prepared for this. So on July 15th of 1970, the 7 organizations that were working independently came together and formed National VOAD. And in 2010, FEMA and VOAD signed a memorandum of understanding with each other to broaden the communication and coordination between FEMA and National VOAD's members. And an MOU is a type of agreement between 2 or more parties. It expresses a convergence of will between the parties, indicating an intended common line of action. So again, back to Hurricane Camille, it hit in 1969 of August, started as a Category 2, ending in a Category 5. The storm originated south of Cuba and moved into the Gulf of Mexico, then moved northward towards the Louisiana, Mississippi region, making its landfall in Bay St. Louis, Mississippi. Camille flattened the state of Mississippi and caused additional flooding and deaths in the Appalachian Mountains of Virginia. They brought volunteers in from Salvation Army, the American Red Cross, and just community members that were willing and able. And they had food and clothing airlifted in, and they brought trained rescue teams in from numerous states surrounding. And Hurricane Camille took 259 people in that storm. That's just a few visuals of the aftermath of it. I'm not even sure how they began to clean that up, but that was after. So VOAD today is a coalition of 70 plus of the nation's most reputable national organizations, whether it be faith-based, community-based, or other nonprofit organizations. There are 56 state and territory VOADs, which represent local regional VOADs, and hundreds of other member organizations throughout the country. And at the bottom, there is just a YouTube video. We do not have to watch that, since I think I may be cutting into the next one. If anyone's interested in that, I can absolutely send it out. It's almost like a little cartoon clip. It's about 5 minutes long, but it kind of explains how disasters play out from the start of the organizations getting together, preparing, and it touches a little bit on emergency management as well. So if anyone's interested in that, I will absolutely share it. But that is all I have. If anyone has any questions, feel free.
Thank you, Courtney. And we will make sure to send out your presentation with that link to the group afterwards. But at this time, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to unmute yourself or use the chat box. While we take that break, I am going to switch over and begin sharing my screen again. All right, seeing as though there are no questions, we are going to move on to our next presenter. So next on the agenda is our logistics chief, Bill Hobaugh. As logistics chief and Region 13 coordinator, Bill's responsibilities include coordinating, supporting, and responding with equipment to emergency disasters, special events, explosive ordnance disposals, and canine calls. He is responsible for approximately $18 million worth of emergency equipment. While performing his duties, he is required to assist multiple agencies such as police, fire, emergency medical services, county detectives, the coroner's office, the Pennsylvania State Police, and the PA State Police Emergency Response Team. Bill has been a volunteer firefighter for 43 years, serving as a lieutenant, assistant chief, and chief. He has served with the Westmoreland County Hazmat Team 800 for over 33 years as a hazmat technician and 24 years as assistant chief. He has professional certifications in emergency management from the Pennsylvania Emergency Management Agency, multiple Pennsylvania Fire Academy certifications, as well as numerous emergency training certifications. Bill has been the chief and Region 13 coordinator for the Westmoreland County Department of Public Safety since 2005. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Bill. Just give me one moment to pull up his PowerPoint. All right, Bill, you are ready to roll.
Okay, can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. First of all, good morning and thanks for everybody that's joined the virtual conference here. As Cass said, I am responsible for the logistics part of ours. And my first slide right there, it just shows you the Westmoreland County and the region task force that we belong to, that also can access support to us if needed in the event of a major disaster. You can see that there's a couple counties that are missing. Venango, I think, is now a part of ours. So there's like, it's not actually 13, it's a total of 16. Go ahead, Cass. And as far as this is our standard operating procedures or procedures, whatever you want to call them, but this is how we respond to resource requests. Initially, they come in from the local jurisdiction. And at that point, if they are in need of an assistance of any type of equipment, and then it comes to the county and will support any request or support that they need. If we need to reach out to, as I stated earlier, we can reach out to our task force, the Region 13 task force, if we need additional support equipment. And then at that point, once we exhausted the local, the county, and the region, then we go to the PEMA and the state. And again, there's paperwork that starts again from the local that we support. That's got to be passed through all the way up to PEMA when we do a request for support from PEMA. As earlier in the, and you can see it was back in 2000, this is the breakdown of the 9 task forces throughout the Commonwealth and the state. I don't know at this point, I think some of them are actually merged a little, so there might be less, but back when I started, this is what the counter task force looked like back then. Go ahead, Cass. And again, the logistics, the equipment request comes in. If it's an emergency, it goes through the 911 center. Non-emergency requests are required 30 days notice prior to any event that we are willing to support and help with. The form is located on the DPS website. And again, with the 30 days notice, if you are applying and there's events ahead of you, it's going to be required, or it's going to be on the availability of the equipment and what we can borrow from the other counties in our task force. But again, we will support anything and work with any jurisdiction in any type of need. What I did is the next, I think it's the next 2-3 slides, is a list of all the equipment that's available. As you can see, we got different types of trailers, support trailers, and everything is noted. The highlight indicates that that piece of equipment is kept out here at our Regional Special Operations Center out at the Latrobe Army Regional Airport. So again, it just go ahead, Cash, you can run through them. And it's just the types, again, generator, light tire, pumps. Special pieces of equipment, again, it goes into detail there, what we have available. And again, a lot of it prevents or goes to support law enforcement. We do have specialized equipment that's available. We do support all law enforcement. I can say that we run a lot with the PSP state SWAT team and other local police departments to support their missions during emergencies. The K9 explosives, again, we have one in Westmoreland County, but throughout the task force, there's a total of 16 explosive K9s that are available to support us. And the program is excellent. Just real quick here, and Cass can run through these. These are deployments that we've been out and supported. Different type of light towers, portable lights, generator lights, that we can support any type of event. Throw phone system, again, that's supporting our SWAT teams. It's available along with that. Anytime we deploy that, we notify our county detective, the district attorney's office, because of the Wiretap Act. The portable LRAD, it's a device for the negotiators, or if we're going to do an evacuation, or if you're having an event, we can use it. It's a long-range acoustical device, so it's also available. The throw robot, again, that's a law enforcement device that supports the SWAT teams. Different type of thermal cameras, night vision that we have available to support. Our mobile command post, these pictures are actually taking, as you can see, the first in the upper left is the trailer itself with an awning. And then now we did get an additional support tent that attaches to the trailer. And you could see us setting it up at Somerset. And the capabilities of it is to have the command area in there. And if you look at the upper right, it shows where the command area is set up in front of a screen that we can put all kind of information out there, maps, pictures, whatever, to support. But that was actually up at September 11th dedication this past year, and everything went well. As I spoke about the canines, again, we have 16 of them throughout the task force. At any given point in time, we can use and deploy anywhere between 1 and 4 dogs for any situation that we've came across in our county. That's actually the lower right-hand picture is Officer Myers doing a parade sweep at Ligonier, Fort Ligonier days before the event started. As I mentioned about the task force, this is actually, there's a total of now 2 bears and 4 bobcats, SWAT vehicles that are available to assist us if we would need it. This is a training evolution that we did back at the training center, the WCC training center, where we did an exercise, and that is the City of Pittsburgh's truck that they brought on. This is a training exercise that we did here back in 2008 at the airport, and that is the Allegheny County Bomb Squad with their robot that they come out and support us for a training exercise. That is actually the robot that has the actor in custody at that time of the training incident. This was a deployment up in Derry that we went up to support the small trailer. With the logistics trailer was a command area for them, and then also lighting. This was a plane crash out in Washington Township back in 2008 that we went out, and you could see we set up the logistics trailer, and there's a little scale there because every piece of evidence that they collected, they had to weigh and document. And again, that's the Bobcat bringing the engine from the plane crash up to the area, the logistics trailer to document it and load it on a truck. This is a Sarah facility drill that we did down in East Huntington Township, and it is a foam trailer that we used to demonstrate. And again, there's 660 gallon of foam, and there is a total of 19 of these foam trailers throughout the task force that we could request to support our mission. This is a support to, I believe this one was out in Delmont for the Allegheny Valley DUI Task Force. We went out and provided lighting and the logistics trailer for them to work out of to do a task force DUI check. This was some shots of the support that we gave to the Salem Township pipeline ruptured when it was on fire. the older command post at that time, and then a support tent for to get us out of the weather. This actually is down in South Huntington Township. It actually turned into a body recovery, but again, it's our trench collapse trailer that supports the county. But again, that was deployed down to South Huntington Township to support their mission. And this is just how, again, as I started at the beginning, the request for equipment, the IC notified by the 911 center, whoever's in charge, your incident commander for your option or your event that night or whatever day or whatever's going on, notifies the 911 center. The 911 center, even after hours, there's an on-call staff. There's 4 of us that take weekly on-call support, 24/7, 365. So again, no matter what time, day, night, holiday, whatever, we're there to support you, and that is how you request it. Unless it's a special event, then again, you do the form prior. But any request is handled through the 911 center. I mentioned about the form. This is for non-emergencies, special event details. Again, it's on the website, but actually I can mail it out to anybody that needs it. But that is actually the form that we need to support your event 30 days prior to it happening. Again, just my name, my office number, email address. If you have any questions or need the form sent out to you, or even if you want the list of equipment that's available, I would be more than glad to mail it out to you.
All right, Bill, thank you very much. At this time, we will open it up if anyone has any questions for Bill. Once again, you can utilize the chat to ask your questions, or please feel free to unmute yourself. Okay, seeing as though there are no questions, Bill's contact information was provided on that last slide, but we will also send it out at the end of today. So if you do have any questions in the future, you'll have his information to reach out. So following right along here with the agenda once more, this is our last presentation before a quick 15-minute break. So next up, we have representatives from the American Red Cross with us today. So we actually have 3 different individuals. So I'm going to go down through the list and just provide you with a brief background on their position and how their organization works towards resiliency. So first we have Tessie Amaretto. She is the executive director. Tessie has been a Red Cross employee since 2003. As the executive director, she supports all lines of service in the Chestnut Ridge chapter, covering Armstrong, Fayette, Indiana, and Westmoreland counties. In her role, she provides leadership and direction to volunteers and employees, ensuring the goals and mission of the American Red Cross are effectively delivered. Next, we have Deborah Fleming. Deborah is the new Chestnut Ridge Disaster Program Manager as of May 2021. Her focus is disaster services supporting preparedness, response, and recovery efforts within the chapter footprint. She is a native of Southwestern PA and comes with significant experience in social services, people management, and working with vulnerable populations to find solutions. And last but not least, we have Rebecca Gadrich, the Regional Disaster Preparedness Manager. As the previous Chestnut Ridge Disaster Program Manager, Rebecca supported the full cycle of disaster services from May 2018 until April 2021. In her new role, she supports all 61 counties of the greater Pennsylvania region in preparedness, focusing upon building community resiliency through disaster education. So bear with me for one moment. I turn this over to Rebecca and allow her to share her screen. Give me one moment. And Rebecca, at this time, you should have access to do that. So please let me know if you have any difficulty.
It looks like it is working on our end. We actually don't have a PowerPoint today. Instead, we're just going to speak through some of the pieces, and I'm actually going to let Tessie start off. Tessie, if you want to come on camera, I will hand it over to you. Thanks.
Okay, thank you so much, Rebecca, and thank you, Cassie. And can you hear me? Can someone just let me know so I'm not talking just to talk?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you so much. Sometimes you never know. But again, thank you for having us and thank you for this opportunity. And before I turn it over to Rebecca to talk more specifically about our disaster preparedness and our disaster program, I just wanted to take a few minutes to talk about the Red Cross, American Red Cross in general. Everything, you can pretty much say everything we do is around preparedness and building resiliency, in all of our lines of service, starting with our biomedical services, which of course is what we're probably one of the most well-known things we do, which is collecting blood and blood products and platelets. We provide over 40% of the blood and blood products for the entire country. Here in Westmoreland County, we are the sole provider of blood and blood products to Excella Health. So, that again is really just being prepared, making sure we have the life-saving blood, whether it's for a sickle cell transfusion or, just your everyday elective surgery. We make sure that there is, blood products on ready and prepared. It goes through a big process to make sure it's safe. And I think probably one of the things we're going through right now is we are actually in an emergency shortage of blood. We have not been this low in our blood supply since 2015. We have less than a day's supply. So we are kind of throwing the pitch out there to everyone that we need help. So anyone who's interested in donating blood, you can go to redcross.org and find a drive, but we really are struggling just due to the rise in COVID, kind of coming back up. And then with folks returning to their workplaces and schools going back in session, people are just kind of busy and doing a million other things. So, that is one of the most critical things we do every single day, is just make sure that if you need blood or your family needs blood, and we make sure it's there. Additionally, we also work with our military, our service to the armed forces. That's one of our, programs where we work with individuals and families from the day you enter the military. From the moment you take your oath and step on that bus to head off to basic training, the Red Cross is there. We will talk to the parents and the family members, and then we provide services from the time you enter until the time you come back and you're a veteran, clear into the end stages of life. We are the only organization that can get an emergency message to someone overseas. It used to be whenever there was no email and no internet, the only way, if you were in the military, you would get notification of anything going on at home, such as a birth or a death, would be through the American Red Cross. We are actually chartered as the only organization. So even though a lot of times now our military men and women will know because they have email that something's going on, a commanding officer will wait for verification from the American Red Cross before they will consider a leave for that individual. We have a whole network of volunteers, 90% volunteer driven, our entire organization. So we have a network that will verify every single thing that needs to be verified. So if that commanding officer gets a message from Red Cross, then he will make the decision, or she will make the decision as to whether the service member is granted leave. Some further things we do when they come home, we work with some of the veteran shelters just to provide food and snacks. During COVID, we had a place in Armstrong County that was struggling, as all the food banks were. And we got loaded up, I believe it was one of our vehicles, and I was the fortunate one who got to take it up and literally just filled their entire pantry with anything you can imagine to help out during that time that they needed us. We of course work in all of our VA hospitals, Walter Reed, and then locally we have Butler, so that we have volunteers who go in. And I think one of the most touching and amazing services we offer in our military program is No Veteran Dies Alone. We have volunteers who will sit with veterans who maybe don't have family left or too far away from family and will do nothing but sit there and make sure that no veteran dies alone. To me, that is just, so when we say we're with you, from the beginning to the end, we truly mean it. We also work additionally with our international partners. When things happen in Haiti, Mexico, anywhere around the world, if we're needed, we will be called in. We also help, of course, with measles initiatives across the third world countries where they're still needed. Probably, I think, besides disaster, our last training service is our health and safety. So again, that's another preparedness course. We're preparing you to save a life through our lifeguarding, through our CPR, AED, first aid. So really, when you talk about building resiliency, which is just such an amazing topic, it really fits with everything that we do across every avenue. We're always trying to build a better prepared community, better prepared individuals, making sure we're prepared for tragedy, making sure we're prepared for those, if there's an accident and blood is needed. And I think one of the key things I would ask that you keep in mind is we're not funded by any government. The Red Cross receives no government funding. We rely solely on contributions from organizations, private individuals, foundations. But a lot of people, that's a misunderstanding. They just assume because we partner so often with FEMA or even any of our local governments that, people just assume, well, they're fine, they will get funds, from the government. And that is not true. Every dollar that we give, every cent we put into our programs comes from the American public. So it's a tough game, but we haven't missed a disaster yet, and we never plan to. So with that, kind of leading into disaster, I'm going to turn it over to Rebecca to talk a little bit more about disaster, and especially locally here in Westmoreland County.
Good morning. I am so excited for the opportunity to be here and actually speak to who we are and what we do from a disaster point of view. I've had an opportunity over about 3 years to work with a lot of you because I was the disaster program manager. And as the disaster program manager, my focus was on prepare, respond, and recover, which for us are the 3 primary components that we support just within disaster. What I love most about this organization is who we are and our mission and how we all come together. For those that may or may not know, our mission statement specifically states that we want to prevent and alleviate human suffering in the face of emergencies. And we do that in a variety of ways. We partner with most of you guys to respond in our local communities, Westmoreland County, Armstrong, Fayette, Indiana counties, and that is what we do with Chestnut Ridge. And just within those areas with response and recovery, you'll see us a lot of times supporting with our single family fires and our multifamily fires. It's one of the highest things that we respond to on a regular day-to-day basis. We also support with a variety of flooding responses. We've supported with cooling shelters and cooling centers and warming centers. Back in 2020, we supported with the Turnpike incident. And on a nationwide level, you typically see us with our mass care, such as our sheltering, our feeding, our disaster assessments. So as an organization, our ability to alleviate human suffering in the face of disasters is very key to who we are and what we do. In my new role as a preparedness manager, I support most of Pennsylvania. Our region covers 61 counties, and my primary focus is just on preparedness education. And the topic of building resiliency is really near and dear to my heart, because when you go back to the definition of resiliency and you define it, it talks about a capacity to recover quickly from difficulties. And in a disaster world, we really want people to know what to do before, how to respond to appropriately, and how to recover after a disaster occurs. And in order to do that, they need to have knowledge. So when I go back to our original mission statement of preventing and alleviating human suffering, resiliency to me just kind of brings it all together and helps to make it a better experience for all involved. So when I sit and think about all of our programming, I thought it was important to kind of share a little bit of what our programs entail and why they were designed the way that they were. So we start with programming on the youngest age bracket possible for us, really. And it's going to be your kindergarten. And we have for kindergarten, first and second graders, an adorable character by the name of Pedro. He's a penguin. And we have a program called Prepare with Pedro. And Prepare with Pedro is very much a storybook idea. And it's designed on their age bracket, their language and learning skills. And we focus on one specific emergency. In our area here in Western Pennsylvania, 9 out of 10 times we're going to talk about our fire situation, or we're going to talk about flooding or winter storms. So right now, the big push with Pedro is going to be our fire safety stories or our flooding stories, just based upon the current time of the year. But Pedro really focuses on helping them understand the basics, and then it encourages them to go back to their family unit and share the story. So they get this copy of this storybook to take back home to their family unit. When we up the age bracket a little bit, we hit 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders, and that is a program called the Pillowcase Project. And the Pillowcase Project came from Hurricane Katrina, and during a mass evacuation of a couple of colleges, there was a Red Crosser that noticed that these students showed up at the shelter with all their belongings shoved in a pillowcase. And when they asked, the students explained that that was the only time that they had. It was the closest thing that they could grab. They just grabbed all of their supplies, just threw it in there, and they had to leave. It was a very quick evacuation for them. Because of that, the Pillowcase Project evolved into this idea of how do we teach people before that bad moment happens, and how do we do it in a very kid-centric component. The program started through a partnership with Disney, and we had pillowcases with Disney characters on it, and it has since evolved to our own set of characters, which is a variety of woodland type creatures. But the Pillowcase Project focuses on a general preparedness model, and then they'll always reference fire safety and then whatever our local hazard is. Again, for us, it's typically going to be flooding or winter storms, just based upon the time of the year and what we typically interact with the most. Both Pedro and Pillowcase focus not just on the education aspect. We want kids to know what to do, but we also want them to have some form of coping skill. And we typically will do some sort of breathing exercise. And if you've ever had an opportunity to be part of one of our presentations, we'll talk about, breathing with color, or even a visualization exercise of your shield of strength. And it's very kid-centric, and it's quick and easy, and it just allows them to feel like they have some control over how they're feeling in the midst of a chaos of a disaster or emergency. Again, both Pedro and Pillowcase really focus on taking things home and working with your family unit. It doesn't matter what the dynamic of your family is, but we focus on a learn, practice, and share methodology, and it allows them to take it home, work with their family unit, maybe create an escape plan, talk about basic fire safety, and really build resiliency on a home front, right? When our programming continues from 6th grade through senior citizens, we have a program called Be Red Cross Ready. It was designed to be taught to just about any age bracket, and we can tailor it to who we're speaking to. So if we're going to talk to senior citizens, we're going to talk through things that are really important to them. It might be documenting what medications you have, so that in a shelter situation, it's not a matter of remembering I take blood pressure medication. It's I know exactly which one it is. We might talk through some things such as putting a label on medical equipment, just so that identifies it as yours. When we're going to talk to 6th graders, we're going to probably focus a little bit more on the evacuation component, building a kit, making a plan, just being prepared across the board. And any age bracket in between has the ability to have it tailored to who they are. The best part about this program to me was that the whole concept of preparedness and safety information, from older adults to individuals with disabilities, access, functional needs, it's all woven into the curriculum. We also include conversations for families with young children. How do you build a plan that centers around them so that everyone knows what to do? And the whole program is designed to reduce any perceived barrier in order for them to know how to take action steps that are manageable. They're very step-by-step action oriented, and more importantly, affordable. Because we all recognize the fact that if it doesn't feel that it's something that they can do in their moment right now, they're typically not going to move forward with any form of preparedness. The final education program we offer is a program called Ready Rating. So all of our key programs talk about educating individuals. Ready Rating focuses upon a community-centric focus. So Ready Rating is a free program. It's web-based, self-paced, and it's designed specifically with nonprofits. It might work for any community organization, house of worship. It's designed to empower them with some basic knowledge and understanding so that they can assess where they are as an organization and then put easy action steps in place to ensure that their business is more prepared in case a disaster were to occur. It's a website-based program, and we teach people how to use the website so that when they go in and they take their own assessment and they start to see where they are and they build these action steps to become more prepared, the beautiful thing about the program is all of the tools that are designed are set to at least meet or exceed OSHA standards. So our educational program that focuses on a knowledge-based component is very centric to either an individual or a person. The other component that we offer, that last program, which it's similar to what we do with our health and training services, is called Hands-Only CPR. It's not a certified program. It was designed to teach untrained bystanders how to perform CPR with the sole purpose of helping someone who has a cardiac arrest moment basically stay alive until additional help arrives. So it's a super quick and easy program that we will teach anyone that is possibly interested, designed literally just to keep people going until actual help arrives, whether it's through 911, your fire department, whoever it is. So for me, the idea of preparedness and community resiliency, we really want to focus on empowerment, knowledge, and just kind of bringing it all together from the youngest to the oldest and encouraging them to go back into their communities and talk with their families, their friends, and share what they have learned. So preparedness as a whole kind of runs the gamut of all of those different age brackets. And to me, it's one of the most exciting things that I get to do. Before I hand it over to Tessie, I want to offer Deb an opportunity to come on camera if she'd like, introduce herself. She is the new disaster program manager. She took my old role. And I know that she is very excited to be part of this organization and this group. So Deb, do you want to make any quick comments? I know I'm just putting you on the spot here, sorry, but then we'll hand it over to Tessie. Deb, you're muted.
Thanks. I just wanted to introduce myself and just say hello. I will be happy to be working with you all, and please feel free to contact me at any time at the Red Cross. I would be happy to be of any support that we can in preparedness and response and recovery. So thank you for letting me have some time here, and I'll give it back to you.
Thanks, Deborah. Just to finish, a call to action. I would ask each of you here today to consider partnering with the American Red Cross. Rebecca did a fantastic job going through all of her preparedness programs, but we just want to partner with you. We're not, sure which part you want to partner with, but we would just ask that you call us, that you reach out to us, and that we can become a partner to make this community safer and build resiliency with you all. So thank you for inviting us, and thank you for giving us some time.
Thank you all very much for joining us this morning. We know how busy all three of you are and all of the great work that you do for the community, so we greatly appreciate it. At this time, does anyone have any questions they would like to ask? Okay, if not, we have reached 10:30. We are actually right on track for today's agenda. So we are going to take a quick 15-minute break. We will start again at 10:45. So we will see everyone then. But in the meantime, go refill your coffee and we'll see you in about 15 minutes. Thank you. All right, welcome back, everyone. The time is now 10:45, so we are going to continue with the mid-morning track of today's webinar. So our first presenter for this track is Mr. Christopher Geary. Chris Geary was designated as the Chief of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Cyber Initiative, and Resource Fusion Unit in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He spent 7 years leading high-profile cyber investigations for the Boston Division Cyber Crime Squad, as well as 6 years designated as the FBI's liaison to Carnegie Mellon University's CERT Coordination Center. Chris has worked and coordinated with numerous federal and state agencies, private cybersecurity firms, as well as large corporations and academia in investigating and mitigating cyber threats. Chris received his undergraduate degree in accounting from Indiana University of Pennsylvania and his master's degree in information science from the University of Pittsburgh. So without further ado, I'm going to turn things over to Mr. Geary and make him the host so he is able to share his screen.
Okay, thank you, Cassandra. Definitely appreciate that. I'm going to bring this up here real quick. Okay, I think everybody, can you see my screen? Can everybody see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Perfect, excellent, thank you. Okay, well, first of all, thank you for inviting me to present here at the virtual emergency management webinar. It's definitely my pleasure. I really look forward to talking about really one of the biggest topics out there now around resiliency, which is responding to ransomware from a cyber threat perspective. Currently, I am a leader of our incident readiness program at a Big Four consulting firm, and ransomware is top of mind on every major corporation's to-do list, to test to make sure that they have policies and procedures in place and that they are prepared, right, in case an event like a ransomware attack does occur to them. And that really should be every type of organization that's out there, from local governments to emergency management systems. Everybody is a target for ransomware actors. And I'm going to kind of walk through that today. I'm going to talk about one group in particular and, kind of hopefully share a lot of insight into how ransomware works and how it attacks organizations and sort of what you can do to help prevent and protect yourself against those attacks. For today, I want to talk about why you are a target for cyber criminals, sort of what that cyber threat landscape looks like and why that matters. And then, like I mentioned, what you can do about it here at the end. And we'll save some time at the end for questions as well. So our world is getting more connected, more complicated every day. The speed of change, the increased reliance on connectivity, data integrity, and process integrity and resiliency has been increasing. But all of this has seemed to really sped up over the last few years here, especially with COVID and all the remote work that's going on, and how much more we are reliant on technology in our everyday lives. Instances where we used to, instances now where we work from home, myself right now included, utilizing a company or even a government's critical, systems or data. Those didn't happen pre-COVID, but now we're seeing them, as part of a commonplace, right? They're happening every day. And being that this happened out of necessity, are we more secure today, or are we more vulnerable to cyber attacks than we ever were before? We see these types of headlines every day now. Ransomware attack has hit XYZ company, requesting X millions of dollars of ransom to, provide the keys to unlock their systems so that they could go back to business as normal. We see that, with local governments being attacked. The city of Baltimore had been attacked twice and ended up costing them over $7 million in cost to repair their systems overall. Maybe we're getting numb to it. However, these attacks continue to get more destructive and more intense and more impactful. Governments and the services you offer are not impervious to these types of attacks, and they're increasingly becoming more of a target because they know that people rely on them, and then that puts pressure on the organizations to have to pay that ransom. We know these cyber attacks are not going to stop. They're going to change, they're going to evolve, and they're going to target us in new ways that we haven't even thought about before. They have been and will continue to evolve and continue to get and target the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of our data, and really utilize that to have the greatest impact. And that's really their ultimate goal. Okay, so go to what is ransomware. Ransomware is basically just a type of malicious software designed to block access to a file or a computer system until a sum of money is paid. It has evolved over the years. I'm going to kind of walk us through that evolution. It usually spreads through phishing emails, malware via hacked sites, where if they really want to target certain people in an organization, they could use maybe a site that they know those types of roles within an organization would go to. Maybe it's an oversight committee or a regulatory agency, or some other type of website that they know they'll go to. They can hack that website, put malware on the website, and then whoever goes to that website gets infected with it. I've seen it where they do it in ads, where they'll place legitimate looking ads onto sites. However, if they see someone coming from a certain company or domain name, they get delivered malware, and they can really target their attacks on an organization. They could use other sophisticated malware or exploit kits utilized to take advantage of vulnerabilities in systems that have not been patched. They do this by again providing infected files or downloads that are then executed, take advantage of that vulnerability and provide the the hacker with access or privileged access to your computer systems. They'll utilize social media and other messaging applications to target you as well, which means that they might friend you on LinkedIn or Indeed and start a conversation. And really the goal is to send you a file that as I mentioned, will if you click it and download it to your computer system, will ultimately provide them unauthorized access into your systems. And then remote desktop protocol, which is a way that most system administrators can remotely administer or fix or upgrade computers. They take advantage of legitimate tools and techniques that are on the system and utilize poor cyber hygiene, right? Maybe it's easy to guess passwords, or maybe they haven't changed the password, or it could be they've been able to obtain credentials for the organization and continuously try to do them, a brute force attack type of attack on a system to be able to get that access in. So it's that access in then allows them to do whatever they want to do, which in this case, what we're going to talk about today is download ransomware onto your computer systems or your organization's computer systems. This graphic on the right, have I been pwned, is a way that you can actually check it's legit. You can check to see if your email address and credentials have been compromised in any of the breaches that are out there. I know in preparing, I've done this. Multiple of my email addresses have been stolen, and really it's for sale back out on the dark web, really the cyber underground. So as it is sold on the underground, right? Hackers can purchase them, they share them, and they are able to utilize those in attacking your organization. So when you talk about ransomware groups, right? It is this is not just some kids in their basement or a one-off hacker who is really not unsophisticated. This is a sophisticated group. This is really organized cybercrime who is behind this. And I'll kind of give you a little bit more insight as we go. But there are hundreds of these groups. Each one of these on this timeline, right, which is 2013 and hasn't been updated, since 2017, but it has grown. There are more. There's probably, nearing thousands of ransomware organizations out there that are attacking organizations worldwide. The one we're going to talk about today is Ryuk and /Conti. Conti is the new name. Ryuk was their old name. And we'll go into those specifically because they've been known to attack emergency services, healthcare, and local governments as well. How did it all start? For ransomware, probably back around 2005. Evgeny Bogachev, he started with an idea of having botnets, were just a group of compromised computers, be able to spread malicious code that would, or malware that would infect other companies, or not companies, but other computers. And then when he had all this access, what he really was trying to do was jump in the middle of banking transactions and do unauthorized wire transfers out of people's bank accounts. He realized that he had a whole subset of compromised computers where the people didn't have maybe enough money that warranted him risking trying to do a wire transfer out, but he wanted to make sure that he could utilize that compromised computer to bring in some money into his organization. And so what he did was he just started to say, well, if I locked up all of their Word documents and pictures, I could charge about $300 and per computer to have it unlocked, because everyone is going to want to have their pictures back, have their documents back. And he did this, and he ended up making I think it was around $20 million when he started doing this. At the end, he had made over 180, roughly $120 million in total. And the FBI had stopped around $180 million of being transferred to him as a result of this scheme that he had devised. The idea of this then spread and was really able to be captured and utilized by other organizations, and they've now expanded upon that. The one group that we are going to talk about is, again, Conti and how they have really evolved it. So as we're going to walking through this, Conti has over 400 victims in the United States, or over 400 victims internationally, 290 in the United States. Again, it is targeted emergency services, law enforcement, local governments. They gather and gain access through spear phishing. Again, those types of methods that I had mentioned earlier, weak passwords, remote desktop protocol credentials. They really have really gone out and they utilize any means to be able to get that access, whether it's system vulnerabilities, providing fake software, that is promoted via search engines, things that they could get you to click and download on. They have a wide range of ways that they can infect your computer system. The one part that they have done that is a little bit not different per se, because this is really the new tactic, it is they steal the data. They'll steal a lot of data from an organization, personal data, information that they know is important to the company that might pose regulatory requirements, might be embarrassing if it got out that personnel files were now posted on the internet or sold in the underground. Typically, when a ransomware group gets hold of a organization, they are usually in the system anywhere from 4 days to 45 days, and that is very flexible on how long they stay in there. They'll stay in there until they really understand the network setup, where all your most valuable data is, and what the information is that they have access to or need to get access to really apply that pressure for you to pay the ransom. Their ransoms have typically gone from $2 million to $40 million. And again, they've victimized 290 US companies at the minimum at this point. That's 290 that have reported it, right? A lot of organizations do not report the ransomware attacks. On the right is a typical note that they leave on your computer system, which is really how do you get in hold of them? How do they, where do you reach out to, pay the ransom, what the ransom is, etc. They have call centers now that they have set up. Again, this is run like a business. And one of the new things that Conti has done is Conti has established that they will actually call you if they do not hear back from you within the first couple days, and they will then try to leverage pressure because they can still monitor some things that are in your network if you've not removed them or eradicated them from the network, and they will tell you that the actions you're taking are not going to be successful. So they definitely know how to apply the pressure. They have really evolved this type of threat, and again, it is cyber organized crime who is really behind this type of threat overall. Okay, so should I pay the ransom? I think this is a great question. I think at times, depending on the organization, it seems like a attractive solution. However, I think you have to really remember you are negotiating with criminals. They may be trustworthy, they may not be trustworthy. Sometimes they leave back doors that allow for reinfection a second time, and then they can re-victimize you again. And that's where you're basically at risk at reinfecting yourself, right? And so understanding and making sure that you've been able to eradicate the actors from actively being on your system, and then being able to back up from a good set of backups that isn't already infected as well. right, really adds to the complexity of responding to a ransomware event. And decrypting isn't easy. It's not one key where it's like a magic password that you plug in and then within an hour, all of your systems are back up. Depending on the size of the organization, the complexity of the networks, there are keys for every computer on your network that need to be identified and then utilized to decrypt that computer. Some of the keys work, some of them don't. It's sometimes there is a back and forth with the ransomware group to provide new keys for the ones that don't work, and really there's been a niche industry that has really developed out of this, where there are companies that just negotiate with the ransomware groups on behalf of organizations, and that's their sole purpose. They've built a reputation with the cyber insurance companies. They've built a reputation with these ransomware groups. They have experience dealing with them and communicating with them. They have experience with paying the ransoms and can do that on your behalf, so that it is not a transaction that is able to get identified back to your organization. So there are groups out there that do that. Coveware is one of them. That is really probably the leader in the field in doing those types of negotiations. It's not recommended to pay the ransom. The U.S. government has put out a lot of information on this within the last few months. Sometimes it's really the only option to keep the business organization running. It really is, when you talk about resiliency, if you have computer systems and you have critical data that is important and you've not backed it up offline, your resiliency and testing of that resiliency will really come into play as a result of a ransomware attack. So one of the things that if you have not, you don't have a backup solution or business continuity program in place, that's one thing that you should really look at. Identify the crown jewels of your data. Make sure that you have a solid backup procedure. Again, recommending keeping them offline. Again, they stay in your systems as long as they need to identify where your backups are, how they're stored, who has access to them, and how they can get to them to corrupt them, right? So that it isn't as easy as just backing up off of your online backups or backups that are stored on your network. If you do happen to pay, the government does want you to reach out and contact the local FBI to let them know that you are paying. So they could be a huge help in these types of situations, where they can sometimes provide you with threat intelligence to help you recover. They might be able to supply you with a key in very limited types of attacks. And recently what's made a lot of news is they've been able to pull back a lot of the ransom that has been paid and recover that for organizations as well. So reaching out to the FBI, making them a partner, probably pre-cyber event is the best way to proceed. But in the event, if you've not done that and you find yourself in the middle of one, reaching out to them, they're well-versed in ransomware. They've been working this, since the early, 2010s, if not earlier than that, and have a lot of experience and a lot of guidance that they can provide. They really are an extension of your incident response team. How do I avoid infection? Kind of looking up here, making sure I'm good on time. We have some sort of endpoint protection in place, antivirus installed on all your servers, all your endpoints, enable two-factor authentication on all accounts, provide cybersecurity awareness training for the various types of threats that are out there, ransomware, business email compromise, phishing, etc. Practice good cyber hygiene, meaning, rotating passwords every 30, 60, 90 days, making sure that patches are installed for applications and systems in a timely manner. Most intrusions, computer intrusions, occur because of an unpatched system where there was actually a fix that was available, but it just wasn't applied. And it's an easy way for hackers get access to systems, and probably the most preferred way for them. Segment your network, stop the spread of ransomware. If you have a nice flat network where any computer can talk to any other computer on your network, the ransomware will be able to encrypt that pretty quickly, and it'll be easy for them to really encrypt the entire network. Always back up your data stored offline. Very critical. Make sure you can back up from it. And then I think the other part is a lot of the consulting that I do, there's going to be a time where you're going to have to run manually, and understanding what functions can run manually, what you need to do to effectively run them manually, and how that would work, and practicing that ahead of time should be a part of your resiliency plan as well. Again, I think you can test your security response with a cybersecurity tabletop exercise. It's a great way to identify maybe enhancements or areas for improvement or enhancements in your response. It's also a great way to galvanize the strengths that you have in your response as well. And I think lastly, have a qualified third party do a cybersecurity assessment just to identify any of the gap areas that are out there that these known organized crime, cybercrime groups would attack, and identify where enhancements can be had. Really identify those ways that you can make it actually harder for the hackers to obtain access, to steal your data, or to really interrupt its availability for your constituents or your employees. So it's really imperative to have those types of assessments regularly. And I think lastly, if you do not have cyber insurance, evaluate it, see if it what type of plans are out there for your size of organization. The insurance does not get you out of the attack, but it does help in taking over it does help in the response that you can provide during the attack. They will usually provide outside counsel that can help run the response. They will provide a third party that would or could negotiate with the ransomware group. And then there's also, it's able to cover a lot of the costs that you might incur in reconstituting your networks and your systems and getting them back up online. And, and looking at the insurance is really valuable if you've not. It's almost critical at this point. There are some changes in the insurance industry that are occurring. So, there's a lot of different variables that go into cyber insurance nowadays. And again, if you're a victim, I think the first, group that I would, I'm not saying this because I retired from the FBI, and I'm saying it because I know the capabilities that they have, along with the Secret Service. And, I'd reach out to both organizations, and then also file a complaint through ic3.gov to make sure that it is on file. You've reported it. And if you end up paying, deciding to pay a ransom, and God forbid that you're not in that situation, that's one of the things that are looked upon. Have you coordinated with law enforcement? And law enforcement is again a valuable asset in helping in your response, and maybe even in some of your recovery efforts on ransoms that you've paid or in decrypting. So that's where I'm at right now. I appreciate it. I think we're at the end. I think I'll open it up to any questions to kind of stay on time. Any questions from the group?
Thank you, Chris. And at this time, if anyone wants to go ahead and use the chat box to ask questions, or Mr. Geary also provided his email address below. So we'll give it a few minutes. Well, we really appreciate you coming, Chris. We often hear of cybersecurity, but being able to see how it can actually affect our agencies and some tips to try and avoid that affection was very critical. So thank you very much for joining us. And if anyone does have any questions later on that they think of, we'll also provide Chris's contact information in a follow-up email. So thank you, Chris. And you're more than welcome to stay on, but if you have, I'm sure you're busy and have other things to get to. So it's totally up to you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And if anyone does have questions, please feel free to reach out to me via email as well. Thank you.
Okay, so we are going to move right along here. And our next presenter is going to be Fred McMullen from the National Weather Service. Fred has been in the National Weather Service for 23 years. He started his career at the Weather Forecast Office in North Platte, Nebraska in 1990. This was a marked change for Fred from where he originally grew up in Western Pennsylvania. He then moved to the Forecast Office in Charleston, West Virginia. After Charleston, Fred worked at the regional headquarters just outside of New York City, where he was the program leader for aviation and severe weather. He transferred back to his hometown of Pittsburgh as the warning coordination meteorologist in the fall of 2010. Fred holds a bachelor's degree in meteorology from Penn State University and a master's in information systems from Marshall University. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Fred. And Fred, we greatly appreciate you coming on. We bother you almost daily with emails and requests, so we appreciate you always living up to it and joining us.
Yeah, so yeah, thank you, Cassandra. So I should be good to go to share my screen, correct?
Yes, you should be able to.
Okay. Let me do that. And you should see my screen now.
Yes, we are able to see it.
Okay, nice pretty screen. This is taking one from Lawrenceville, looking, I guess it's looking west into the city on a nice sunset day there. But yeah, good afternoon, good morning, everybody. Depends what time you got up this morning, I guess, if it's lunchtime or not. But anyway, so I'm going to talk about kind of some overall like weather climate challenges, trends, and then also kind of locally and for Westmoreland County, drill down to some of the severe weather events that have happened across them. So, looking at the numbers over the last 40 years in terms of billion-dollar weather disasters, we're seeing more of these. This is when we kind of started tracking disasters, but on average, we see about 15 a year across the United States from various things, from hurricanes, which usually lead the way. Anytime a hurricane makes landfall, it's a billion-dollar disaster. And then also flooding, but also if a drought and wildfire as well. So here are some statistics. I'm not going to go through all of them. But again, every state in the United States over the last 40 years has seen at least $1 billion disaster. And that trend seems to continue. So just looking at 2021 so far, this was updated in like mid-August. And so you'll see Ida be on here, as we update this map every couple months. But again, we average 15 a year and we're at 7 so far. So we're halfway there. Hopefully we stay below average this year because we don't want these disasters. But you can see, they span from hail to snow to flooding to tornadoes to drought to flooding again in the West Coast. So again, various different events that have led to these billion-dollar disasters. Looking more closely into Westmoreland County, again, if you've heard me speak before, Westmoreland County is the tornado capital of the Commonwealth. It has seen the most tornadoes since 1888. This map here at the left shows you all the tracks. This is from 1950 on. We do have a database that goes back to 1888. But again, really, the tornadoes that affect the county, if you look at the way the lines are drawn, these are more like northwest to southeast. These are more south to north. So they're coming mostly in two directions across the county. And then you can see some of these here up the valley between the Chestnut and Laurel Ridge. And then just before the ridge line, again, you can see several tracks. So again, the magnitude of an influence on the weather locally with vertical wind shear, which leads to tornadoes. And then if you look at the flooding as well, outside Allegheny County, Westmoreland County has the second most flash flood events in our region, largely because the population, the urbanization, and then of course, as our infrastructure gets older, it only takes 3/4 of an inch in 1 hour to cause flooding, especially, in the, Greensburg, Murraysville area, and then the Latrobe and all the urban areas across Westmoreland County. So again, it doesn't cause much to get water issues. If you look at the other thunderstorm hazards across the county, again, severe wind, that's pretty much an impact anywhere. That's usually what we see a lot of our severe weather reports come in from across Western Pennsylvania. And these blue circles indicate higher wind gust reports with storms. But for the most part, pretty much every part of the county has seen a high wind report in the last 70 years. And likewise for large hail, again, it's just a function of, if people are around when hail falls. Like, so we had those storms that happened, at least over my house, early Tuesday morning. if people don't get up and look at see how big the hail is, we don't know how big the hail is. But overall, you can see the urbanization right along Route 30 into Westmoreland County. A little bit less reports up in the Northwest, but for the most part, you can kind of say no place is immune from seeing severe hail across Westmoreland County. As far as climate, in terms of summer trends, so this is kind of using the 1991 to 2010, and where do we see temperatures, increasing, decreasing, and you can see across like Western PA, really there's been a really neutral change in terms of summer temperatures. When I say summer, it's June, July, August, and then if we look back over a period of time, temperature trends from 1896 to 2020, again, Northwest PA has seen a slight uptick, and then also, across the Northeast. But again, for Southwestern PA, really not much, half a degree for the most part. Where we are seeing trend increases is definitely is precipitation. So you can see Western Pennsylvania, precipitation trends have increased over almost nearly an inch over the last 30 to 40 years in terms of what our average is and what we're seeing. And then if you kind of average this out over a longer period of time, just to see general trends, again, the Midwest, the Great Lakes have seen more precipitation over the last 124 years. And then that's mostly focused across the Eastern United States. And again, Eastern United States here as well. So if we look at winter trends, again, the top is 1991 to 2020. Again, really a little fluctuation, half a degree warmer than normal is what we've seen. But if you look at over since 1896 to 2020, again, this is where we're seeing a degree and a half warmer temperatures over the winter. That winter is defined as December, January, February, more so across northwestern PA, northeast Ohio. Could be a function of increasing lake temperatures. And then if you look at the precipitation trends, again, increase in precipitation in the wintertime as well over the last 30 years across western PA. And we had these new normals come out this year that we do every 10 years. It's a moving 30-year average. And our snowfall total has actually gone up with these new normal. So again, so the mantra that people say, okay, we're it's warmer temperatures and climate change and we're not getting as much snow. Well, that our last 30-year trend shows increased snow, and we're also seeing definitely an increase in precipitation across all months of the year, especially the summer and the winter months. If you look at temperature frequency, again, this is for Westmoreland County. These are the days number of days we've seen 9 degrees or greater. So on average, like Pittsburgh sees about 7 days a year above 90. And so this line right here kind of shows you 10. And you can see, over the last, since 2010, again, we really, outside, 2010, 11, 12, we've kind of been below that the last 8 years. But again, what you'll see is, back in the 50s and 60s, it was really warm. And through the 60s, it was warm. Then we had a really hot spell, which created our highest temperature on record, which happened in 1988. That was a really hot year. But again, overall, over the last 8 years, you haven't seen these big heat waves like we've seen, back in the early 90s, late 80s, 60s, and the Dust Bowl era, the 30s. So we haven't seen that. And then these are temperatures greater than 95 degrees. Again, we've only had it happen 6 times in the last 11 years, and that was all 2012 and 2011. So again, the frequency of hitting 95, again, really hasn't been there that much since 1996. We've only hit it 6 times in the last 25 years. So again, not often we hit that, but if you look at, you kind of break this chart in half, right? You do see more on this side than you do on this side. So you could argue there's a higher frequency, but again, it's minimal. This is where we're definitely seeing a change. So this is precipitation amounts that are greater than 2 inches per hour in a day since 1950. So we had, all about 1, through the 50s, and then a break in the 60s when it was really hot and dry. Then we've had scattering of, 1 events. But if you look, towards 2004, of course, this is Francis Nyman. Then you go 2008, and you look at all these years. I mean, we've had 2 events in 19, 18, and those were our wettest, 2 out of 3 years on record for Western PA. So again, you're definitely seeing more blue lines from the 1990 on than you did, prior to 1990. So again, that's definitely where we're seeing shifts. We're also seeing shifts in warmer overnight lows. That's kind of our big thing right now, is why we're seeing temperatures across our region. The average highs aren't really changing much, like I showed you with the 90 to 95, but the overnight lows are creeping up. More nights that are at or above 70. And then if you look at this chart here, this is greater than 3 inches or more in one day. Again, you can see, we've had numerous instances, instances since 1996 and only 2 before that. So again, we're seeing higher precipitation events on the last 30 to 40 years. As far as it goes with river flooding from Westmoreland County, again, to give you a perspective, now the locks and dams really made things a little bit easier for us. We didn't have those in the 30s. If you look at Charleroi and Conemaugh, kind of using a benchmark 1975 to kind of give you idea in terms of the last 45 years, we've had 40% of our highest crest of Charleroi the last 45 years. And we've had 50% of our highest crest at Conemaugh in the last 45 years. So again, you're definitely seeing, and our records for these go back into the 30s and 20s. So again, if you split this in half, like a sandwich, right? You split a sandwich in half. You split this in half, you might see more meat on the side from 1975 on than you would prior to that. And so again, a higher frequency of river issues. One of the things that you all may not be aware of is that PennDOT did this study with Michael Baker Engineering of all these flood-prone streets, and then went back and looked at all the issues with flooding and road closures. And all these numbers mean if you zoom into this number, you can kind of see more points. And I try to do my best to get a shot of all the Westmoreland County, but it's broken up into different zones. So here's Latrobe, kind of give you an idea. Here's Delmont, Murraysville, White Oak, New Stanton, of course. But you can see all throughout the county, there are flood-prone streets. I mean, you just zoom in right into here to close to Ligonier. I mean, you got 15, places right here. You got a lot in the mountains here as well, going on 30. So again, these are good things to kind of, if you're a local coordinator or if you're a public works official, and this can kind of help you out to determine, what are my hot spots? Maybe if there's a heavy rain event coming in, maybe I can clean the drains ahead of time to kind of help minimize this the best I can. I know new home divisions have kind of, created some challenges, at least over, in Allegheny County and other counties across the state. And that may be a similar thing here. But again, this is a good resource, and I can share this link with Cassandra and to have it in my notes with the presentation afterwards, if you're interested. They did this for the entire state, so this is for the entire Commonwealth. So one of the other things that you all can do to kind of help stay weather aware is be part of our ambassador program. So this is a free program, and this is a program that's it's for the public and private sector, and allows us to kind of engage with you and be a force multiplier for us to help kind of spread weather safety. Initially, you get 4 emails a year ahead of the season. So we do a September release, and then we do December 1st release. With December 1st, we'll kind of cover all the winter stuff. And then we follow that up with a local newsletter, talk about, it's only a couple pages, but big events across our region, some things you may need to know, some refreshers of where to get information and, what our criteria is. And then also, if you need, talks at your facility, company or your business or your township or municipality, again, reach out to us. Again, we're a free service provided by the federal government. I'll be more than happy to kind of drill, events down to your local region, and we can, work and talk about past events. So this map kind of shows you all of our ambassadors across our region, a lot in Allegheny County, but we have a fair amount in Westmoreland County, which is really good. And so again, if you're interested, here's the link at the bottom. You will be able to have that. So it's a real easy form to fill out. I think it's like 8 lines or something, mostly just general information. And then really you can, if winter hazards are your biggest thing, just promote winter. If severe weather like thunderstorms and tornadoes and flooding are your big issues, just promote those. So, you obviously won't need the hurricane ones that much because we don't get impacted by hurricanes that often. But so really it's kind of a program, kind of you get out of it what you want. So in terms of whatever your focus area is for what natural hazards, really emphasize that. And here's some examples of some of the graphics that we provide. Again, we know if river flooding, if you have a business along a river, or your township, is along like, the Mon River, you can kind of talk about, signs of river flooding. We have severe weather for the summertime. If there's a severe thunderstorm watch, lightning, again, that's a big issue. Tornado, we had a tornado watch September 22nd. These are things that we put out, this graphic here at the bottom on our social media channels. But again, feel free to push that through your safety meetings locally. And that's really all I have. I kind of went through it pretty quick, but that's our webpage. That's my email address, and that's my contact information. And if you have any questions, just let me know.
All right. Thank you very much, Fred. We'll leave it open for about a minute here while we switch some things around. If anyone has any questions, I do not see anything in the chat as of now, but please feel free to unmute yourself as well. Okay. If not, then thank you very much, Fred. We will be sure to share your presentation with the group so they have access to those links afterwards, but we really appreciate you joining us. Okay. So moving right along here and following along with the agenda once again, the next presentation is actually my own. So for those of you who are just joining the webinar, my name is Cassandra Kovach, and I currently serve as the Public Information Officer and Community Outreach Coordinator for the Westmoreland County Department of Public Safety. I've been with the department for close to 2 years now, a lot of which was focused on the COVID-19 response. So it really gave me kind of a crash course into the field of emergency management. Prior to my role here, I did work in healthcare as a physical therapist assistant, but now I'm currently in pursuit of my bachelor's degree in Homeland Security. So I'm looking forward to a long career in emergency management. So based on my role with the department, in a coordination with our assistant PIO, Courtney, we work daily with social media as a tool to get information out to the public. So that is kind of what my presentation is going to focus on. What is social media's role in emergency management? More often than not, social media can kind of get a bad rap, but it really is an essential part of our daily life for many people. It's a vital tool for communicating, and it provides an additional source of information, not only for the public, but for us as emergency managers as well. So emergency managers can use social media to gain situational awareness, to engage and build trust with stakeholders, and also to share important information. So we're going to kind of take an inside look on how we can use social media as opposed to traditional approaches, and how we can use it to manage information before, during, and after an emergency situation. So before we do that, we're going to look at why use social media. So why are we kind of converting over to social media while still using some of those traditional approaches? So in 2021, the Pew Research Center did a study looking at the use of social media. And the study resulted in the fact that 97% of Americans have a cell phone at their disposal. In addition, 72% of Americans use social media platforms. And then to add to that, 50% of Americans use social media for their news. So that's really important because you have over half of the nation who's using social media as their main source to get important information. So just as traditional media, such as the news, the paper, anything like that, were communication channels, social media is the exact same thing. And it's just another way for emergency managers that we can get information out about preparedness, recovery, and mitigation efforts. So next we're going to look at the interaction. So one thing that social media has done is it's really changed the way we're able to interact with the public and to get that information out. So traditional media, which is kind of known as the platforms that were used in
Is there a car company that's responding?
Hey, Chris, your microphone's not muted. I'm sorry. Thank you. Okay. So traditional media really only provided one-way communication from emergency managers to the public through press releases or the evening news. And whereas that was effective because it allowed for careful messaging and greater control of when the information could be released, it was also very slow and you were only able to get it out to a passive audience. So now that social media has become more prevalent, it really allows for that two-way street. It allows for users to generate their own content, as well as bring together ideas and people virtually. So it's really created that ability to interact more. And whereas the public might rely on us for information, it's now the same way. We might rely on the public to get that same information out. So now the average citizen has the ability to post text, videos, and information straight from their phone into a big audience. So it's really outstripped the pace and the volume of standard press releases, and traditional media, really making it one of the most used forms of communication. So it's important to note, if your agency or your organization uses social media as a way to get information out, you'll often notice that the public expects you to interact with them, whether you expect it to or not. So a lot of the times if you post information out, they're going to want to be able to ask questions, and they're going to want that feedback and that response back in a timely manner. So whether you already have a platform or whether you're thinking about getting one in the future, just make sure that you have the people there who are able to do that interaction, or able to respond in a timely manner. So next we have our alerts and warnings. So what actual messages can we put out through social media, and how can they affect the way people respond in the resiliency? So let's say, just as Fred just mentioned, our area is prone to flooding and tornadoes. So let's say you have a big disaster like a tornado watch going out. Through social media, you can put out alerts, warnings. You can put out even the response status of what responding agencies are doing out in the field, evacuation orders, family statuses, and even different relief resources that are available for the public. So when you have your initial incident and then you use social media to put out these messages, when those messages are well formed and well received from the public, it can do many things. It can help to ensure the public safety. It can help protect the environment, and you're also providing that education and informational component. And then a big one that I see, which is listed here, is elicit public cooperation. So let's say you have flooding on a certain roadway and you use social media to put out that that roadway is closed and to find an alternative route and maybe provide that alternative route. That's a way to help increase that cooperation with the public. It can help maybe reduce some of the traffic that's being seen in that area. So in order for these messages, though, to really be effective during response and recovery, it's important to have your social media presence already established with the public. So oftentimes you might, like, the public will go out looking for information when there is something going on. If they already know that your agency has these platforms available that they can go on and they know are providing vetted and accurate information, that might be one of the first places they go to look for. So really get your name out there if you do plan on using social media platforms for this. Next, we have, what are you trying to accomplish? So in emergency management, we have our 5 phases of a disaster. We have prevention, preparedness, response, recovery, and mitigation. So depending on what you are trying to accomplish might depend on what type of social media platform you use. For example, let's say you're focusing on preparedness and you want to teach the community how to put together a go bag in case of an emergency. You might use YouTube to create a vlog and to put that information out so they can actually see it in real life. But that might differ from when you're trying to accomplish something in the response phase of a disaster. You're not going to use YouTube as your main media platform to get that out because it's going to take too long and it's not applicable. Instead, you might use Facebook or Twitter to get that information out quickly into a big audience where it can be reshared and reposted. So social media platforms themselves. There's many more that are just listed in this picture here, but these are some of the main ones that we see. There's all different kinds of platforms, and they all have different functions and features. Some allow for social networking, some allow for media sharing, there's discussion forums, and there's even blogging and publishing. A lot of the features of these platforms, however, do overlap. So social networking are one of the most common and are really what people think of when they hear of social media. These are your Facebooks, your Twitter, even LinkedIn, which many people use in the professional world, but they allow people to connect with one another and with other organizations. They're highly interactive and they really encourage the communication back and forth. And a lot of these platforms now even allow you to create content that is more accessible for people with access and functional needs, which Michelle from our department will touch on later, but they can include photo and video captioning to really make it all inclusive. The next type of platform are media sharing sites. So these include YouTube, Instagram, and Snapchat. So they focus exclusively on sharing photos, images, and videos. And whereas these features can still be seen on the social networking sites, media sharing sites are made exclusively for this purpose. So for people who may learn better from looking at graphics, there's a lot of people who are more visual learners, or it takes something visually to spark their interest and make it appealing. You can use Instagram for that. You can take your information you're trying to put out, take that text, really narrow it down, and put it out as an image that might be more understandable for some people. So the four main uses of social media in emergency management. We have the rebroadcasting of media and public information, the ability to communicate directly with constituents, the building situational awareness, and then the overall factor of enhancing community resiliency, which is one of the main reasons why we're here. And communication is a big part of making sure that your community does have the ability to be resilient in the wake of a disaster. So just to dive a little deeper into some of these examples, we'll start with rebroadcasting media and public information. So one of the ways that you can do this through social media in emergency management is making sure that you follow your important partners within the community, or even different state partners that you might work with often. So an example of this, as you can see, the first image here was taken from our Facebook page. And this is an example where we reposted on Facebook something from the National Weather Service from Pittsburgh. It was a flash flood watch. So it's just another way to get that information out to our followers as well. And then for public information, this is another example of coordinating with a state agency. When COVID testing sites were out, the Department of Health would try to get that information out to local areas. And whereas they might have put it out through press releases and through their website, by us resharing this, and this middle one is actually on our Instagram, it allowed to get that information out to a different population that otherwise might not look at the Department of Health's information. And then lastly, the example over here on the right, that's actually taken from our Twitter. So that's an example of us putting out a turnpike alert of restricted roadways. So the ability to take this information and to share it to broader audiences who are then going to share it on their pages as well, just really increases the visibility on this information. So next we have the capabilities to communicate directly with constituents, and that leads to this enhanced interaction that social media allows us to have now. So the first example was taken from our Twitter. So whereas before we may have relied on the news or the media to get out a press release, this is an example how we can take a screenshot of a press release and give it directly to the public. So it's almost cutting out that middleman in between and making it more accessible. And then over on the right here, and this is one of the most crucial aspects of social media that really builds those relationships between your agency and the public, is the ability to directly respond to them. So this was taken off of our Facebook page during the COVID pandemic, when people were trying to seek information on where they can get resources or where they can get accurate data on what's going on. So the ability to be able to respond directly to them and provide them that information gives them kind of an ease of mind that they know they have a place to go to. Okay, situational awareness. So in emergency management, we're always trying to gain the situational awareness. And this is just another tool in our toolbox that we can use to be able to do that. So an example of this is we have TweetDeck. So TweetDeck is kind of an extension of Twitter, where you can sign up for an account and you can go on and search what's trending out in an area by using different hashtags. So for example, I know it's kind of small on the screen, but you can see across the top, you can use these different fields to input, let's say flooding, if you're looking for information, seeing what's going on out in the field about flooding. You can see people's posts if you were to type in hashtag Westmoreland County, if people are trying to link it to a direct region. So this really allows you to go through Twitter and to kind of scale down what all you're seeing and look for trends. Another example, which is over on the left-hand side, is another way we can gain situational awareness through monitoring social media. So this is an example of an individual who posted onto an Across Westmoreland page on Facebook, and they were just letting their fellow members of the group know that, hey, there's flooding in Youngwood and this street is closed. So for us sitting back in an emergency operations center and scrolling through social media, this is another way that we can kind of see, hey, what's going on out in the community that we might not already have eyes on. So another great tool. And for any of the local emergency management agencies out there, if this could be a great way, if you recruit volunteers for your agency, maybe look at recruiting some of the younger generations who have grown up with social media and are super familiar with it. By doing that, they could be your best asset in the event of an emergency if they're able to sit and scroll through social media and maybe gain some of that awareness. But okay, let's move on here. Next, we have kind of the big ticket item, the community resiliency. So once again, this communication is just another additional tool that we can use to gain that resiliency within our area. So by using the platforms listed on the left-hand side, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, and even your municipal website is a great source of information. Pairing it with a social media strategy, whether it's pairing it with a National Preparedness Month campaign, or pairing it with a response where you need to get information out with pre-scripted messages that you already have. By pairing it with that strategy and getting that message out, you're helping to achieve a portion of that resiliency. So lastly, in the world of emergency management, we love tactics. We love things that we can apply to make things better, to kind of fix an issue. So using the acronym learning here, we have our different tactics that we can use when applying social media to emergency management. So number one is listen. This is the first and one of the most important steps in building successful social media presence. Learn the language of social media. You definitely want to learn the language beforehand, before an emergency actually happens where you're forced to use it. But learn how people use hashtags or different ticket wording to get their point across. And also listening to gauge the public sentiments about your agency. If you take the time to learn some of that ahead of time, you can learn areas where you can expand and grow upon. Next is to share experiences. Don't be afraid to use social media to share what your agency's doing or different initiatives that they have going on. No one on social media wants to hear what you're having for lunch today or anything like that. But sharing some of those big ticket item experiences can be great because it's really going to engage the public. A is ask. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Nobody has all the answers, us included. So asking questions gives the public the opportunity to share their experiences, which we might even be able to learn from. R is repeat. And this kind of comes back to the rebroadcasting aspect of it. Don't be afraid to repost, reshare, and keep that information flowing from some of your community partners. Especially in an emergency, repeating that critical information over and over again is really important, because on Facebook or Twitter, where you have a news feed, after you post something once, it might get stuck at the bottom of a news feed where no one sees it again. So don't be afraid to reshare it and keep it relevant. Next is news. So still relying upon the news is still a big part of tradition or of the communication outlets that we use. They're just another form of media. So don't be afraid to follow your news agencies in different areas like that to stay attuned of stuff. And then we have insight. So whereas it's good to have your cold hard facts, people are more likely to relate if you shed some light on the true meaning or the true impact of something behind the scenes. So don't be afraid to kind of expand on certain topics and maybe let the public know how something could affect them. N then stands for enlarge. So this is where and I know it's a little bit of a stretch with the E there, but this is where you're really trying to enlarge your presence. So don't be afraid to follow community partners, follow leaders in your community, different organizations that you rely on, because the more you follow them, they're going to follow you back. And that's going to expand your following and how many people get the message whenever you put it out. And then lastly is gratitude. So don't be afraid to thank your followers for the information that they share, or for even following your page to begin with. because the more followings that we get and the more that information is shared, the more we're doing our role in emergency management to really gain that resiliency. And then to end it all, because I know I'm about a minute over right now, this is a great quote that I found that kind of wraps it all together and brings it full circle for what we're here for today. So during disasters, relevant and timely information can be the difference between life and death. Social media, such as Twitter and Facebook, can facilitate the rapid dissemination of critical information. Social media is useful during other phases of emergency management as well, particularly preparedness, to build more resilient communities. So at this time, I am going to open it up for if anyone has any questions, or if not, please feel free to utilize my phone number that's listed here, my email, and ask me afterwards as well. And I don't see anything in the chat box. Okay, give me one moment. I'm going to switch my screen over. I apologize. Bear with me one moment, please. Okay, so next up, we have our keynote speaker for today. So allow me to introduce Mary Ann Tierney. So Mary Ann is currently serving in the role of Region 3 Administrator. Mrs. Tierney was appointed Regional Administrator for FEMA Region 3 in August of 2010. And also served concurrently as acting regional administrator in FEMA Region 2 for 10 months following the devastating effects of Hurricane Sandy on New York and New Jersey. From April to June 2017, she served as acting associate administrator for mission support at FEMA headquarters. From January to June 2021, she served as acting FEMA deputy administrator at FEMA headquarters. As regional administrator, Mrs. Tierney is responsible for leading FEMA's efforts in the Mid-Atlantic to help people before, during, and after disasters. Mrs. Tierney also spent 7 years with the New York City Office of Emergency Management, ending her tenure as Assistant Commissioner for Planning and Preparedness. While working for the City of New York, Mrs. Tierney was responsible for developing and revising emergency plans, as well as overseeing the city's recovery and mitigation activities. During the city's response to the attacks of September 11th, she held a key position coordinating debris management activities at the World Trade Center site and the Fresh Kills landfills, as well as the city's application for federal funding to reimburse costs associated with response and recovery operations, which totaled over $4.75 billion. Mrs. Tierney has extensive experience coordinating large, complex emergency response operations. She has managed over 60 EOC activations in New York City and Philadelphia, and regularly deployed to large emergencies to coordinate on-scene response activities. Mrs. Tierney holds a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science from American University and a Master's in Public Administration with a concentration in Public and Nonprofit Management from New York University. Mary Ann, her husband Ed, son Aiden, and dog Molly reside in South Philadelphia. She's an avid runner and home chef. So at this time, I am going to turn it over to Ms. Tierney. Give me one moment here.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we are able to hear you. And you do
Great.
have the ability, if you want to share your screen, you should be able to now.
I don't need to, I didn't make a PowerPoint or anything like that. So I'm just going to give remarks and hopefully if I'm happy to take questions at the end of my remarks. I was asked to focus specifically on the Building Resilient and Infrastructure Communities Grant Program. So I will do that. But before I get started into that, I do want to just thank everybody for inviting me to speak here today. I did get a chance to hop on a little bit before my remarks and look through the participant list, and it was nice to see some friends
from my time in Philadelphia that I work with throughout the Commonwealth and from Westmoreland County. So thanks again for inviting me to speak today. So what I want to kind of start off with is the fact that we have a really significant opportunity to increase our whole region's climate resiliency, right? But in particular, I think in Western Pennsylvania and Westmoreland County, and support communities vulnerable to disasters through the suite of grant programs that are available through FEMA's mitigation division. So we have BRIC, the Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities Grant, which is new, but we also have Flood Mitigation Assistance, which is a longstanding grant program, and then the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program, which is available after disasters. And in Pennsylvania, we have a really unique opportunity with something positive from COVID, that COVID has hazard mitigation grant funding associated with it, which is an incredible amount of money for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and I think a real transformative opportunity for the whole Commonwealth. And I would encourage the county to think about that in conjunction with BRIC. So if you haven't heard about BRIC, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about it today, and then I can answer some questions. But the BRIC program is designed to support state and local communities and then the tribes and the territories to undertake hazard mitigation projects, recognizing which reduce the risk to disasters and other natural hazards. But like the thing about BRIC that's different than its predecessor, which was the pre-disaster mitigation program, there's a couple of things that are different. Number one, BRIC is a nationally competitive program in a way that is much more expansive than PDM. Also, the amount of funding available is much larger, I mean, exponentially larger. And the amount of funding that could be available for an individual project is also substantially more than what was available in the past. So this isn't PDM on steroids or PDM recast as something bigger. This is a whole new program that I think really unlocks opportunities that did not exist before. And when thought through in conjunction with the other mitigation grant programs that FEMA has available and possible partnering with the private sector and state and local funding, again, there are real transformative opportunities here. So BRIC's guiding principles are in supporting communities through capability and capacity building, right? And encouraging and enabling innovation. That's, I think, another key difference between BRIC and its predecessor grant program. So BRIC priorities are focused on a couple of things, being economically viable, but also the lifelines. And I can go into more detail like that if you want later, if there's questions. But there's things like nature-based solutions, partnering again is a big part of that. Thinking about climate resilience and adaptation, which is a priority of the Biden-Harris administration, but also a key part of the evaluation process for BRIC. So in addition, like I mentioned, not just funding related to BRIC, which this fiscal year is $1 billion and last fiscal year was $500 million. So really a lot more mitigation money that's been available pre-event than ever before. We're also partially implementing the recent executive order that implements the federal flood risk management standard for all hazard mitigation funding projects across all of our grant programs. So this will require that projects be built with an additional 2 feet of freeboard, which is above the height above the base flood elevation. So that's important to consider. And again, that's in line with our thinking about the future risk, not just current risk, which is, I think, another thing that we should be considering for BRIC. So as I mentioned, BRIC is a competitive grant program. We have the $1 billion available. The application period is open now. It closes January 28th. The Commonwealth has established an interim deadline. It's, I believe, in mid-November, but Tom Hughes, I'm sure, would be able to give you the specific date. I have a date, but it says tentative, and so I don't want to announce a date, but my understanding is it'll be sometime in mid-November. We are really encouraging applications that focus on community lifelines. So just to run through those real quick, in case you're not familiar with them, the lifelines are safety and security, food, water, shelter, health and medical, energy, communications, transportation, and hazardous materials. And I think, again, in focusing on the partnering aspect, some of these things are either in the form of a private nonprofit or in the private sector. In particular, energy, there's some potential opportunities to partner with the private sector on the BRIC grant. Again, with the public portion being funded through BRIC, but maybe a private portion being funded by the private sector entity. So I mentioned a couple of the changes, and I wanted to like mention there's a couple of webinars. So let me just pull those up real quick. So if you're interested in BRIC, there's some webinars that are coming up on October 13th. There's a federal agency roundtable webinar, and then there's a lot of material on the webpage that FEMA has around BRIC. So I'd encourage you to go to FEMA.gov and look for BRIC, and you can get all the materials there. And there's some recorded sessions as well, so you can learn more about it. And Region 3, again, we're very focused on outreach around BRIC, which is why I was excited that this was something that everybody was interested in talking about. So I will stop there to open it up for questions. I'm happy to take questions about BRIC, or if you have other questions about FEMA, I wanted to make sure we had time to cover those as well. So I will see if there's any questions. You could just raise your hand and we'll kind of go through the list.
Thank you very much, Mary Ann. I do not see any questions in the chat as of now, but do any of our participants have any questions that they would like to ask? Please feel free to go ahead and unmute yourself. Okay, it does not appear that we have any questions, but Mary Ann, if it's okay, if even someone from your staff wants to provide a contact that anyone could ask questions to at a later date, that would be great, and we can always.
Yeah, I'll just put my email in the chat. Like if anybody has a question, feel free to, you can send me an email. I can get you to the right person. So I'll put.
Thank you very much. We greatly appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to come and talk with everyone today. And you are our last presenter before lunch, so we greatly.
So right in time for lunch.
Yes, I could just throw one thing out there in reference to the ARP considerations. Do you have any late and great news about that?
About what? I'm sorry.
About the American Recovery Plan and that information. The ARP.
Well, I mean, obviously that's very large. Could you just be like a little bit more specific to help me figure out what you're asking?
Yeah, so that's exactly where we're at, because we don't have specifics. So if there's anything that you can offer us relevant to the local considerations that would be FEMA related in the American Recovery Plan that you think would be relevant at the local level, we would certainly enjoy to hear that.
Yeah, that's a good question. So obviously we're providing reimbursement for COVID-19 through our public assistance program. That's a separate legislative authority through the Safford Act. There's nothing really specific in the American Recovery Plan that's specific to FEMA programs or funding. But I think you raise, so here's the thread I'll pull for you. I think you raise, I think your point is that there's all this money, right? There's money from FEMA, there's money under the CARES Act that people still haven't spent. Then you have the rescue plan, the recovery plan. Then you have the infrastructure bill, which, eventually will get passed. So there is a lot of money that's available. And what I have seen both at the state and the local level is people struggling to kind of knit that quilt together of how to maximize the utility of all of the funding sources that are available. There isn't a Rosetta Stone that kind of unlocks for you, okay, if you have this item, you should use public assistance. If you have this item, you should use CARES Act. If you have this item, you should use the recovery plan and apply for a BRIC grant. So I think that it does require effort and partnership with your, if grants is separate in the county. I'm not sure how Westmoreland is set up, but grants management, finance, budget, even economic development. I think an interdisciplinary team that can kind of map out what is on the table in terms of funding coming your way from a state level and also perhaps potentially directly, and then what is the best use of that money, right? And so sometimes it may make sense to use public assistance, even if it's CARES Act eligible, because the CARES Act funding could then be used for something else that PA can't cover. And likewise, it may make sense to say, now that COVID HMGP is available, and I know the state is ramping up their plans around that, it might make sense to have some of the recovery plan money and some of the HMGP money potentially pair up to make a project even more robust. So I think that's probably what you're getting at. And I have not seen like a good matrix that really kind of maps that out. But I do encourage, because you're not like the first person that's had that problem. I've observed that problem myself, and this is the advice I've given jurisdictions when we've kind of gotten around to having this discussion. You know, either they'll call or it'll come up in a meeting like this. Is that at the local level, I think really engaging an interdisciplinary team and your political leadership is really critical to kind of mapping out the best use of the money, because there's so much opportunity that I think is being lost because there's just this sea of funding with not a lot of clear guidance.
Yeah, I think you really nailed it there, because that's what I was trying to find out. And one of the things that I've been receiving is that be creative and look at how you can use the equity language or use the critical infrastructure language by renaming some previous projects to include those particular touch points. And I was just wondering if that was, something, a good way to go about it as well.
Well, I mean, I here's what I would encourage. I would not just encourage a rebranding campaign, right? Like I think, there are real things in the equity space that as a government, at every level we need to be addressing, and the same thing around climate resiliency that we need to be addressing. And if you have projects that are shovel ready, so to speak, and they speak to those areas, I think nugging down on how they speak to those areas is really important. I don't think just simply changing the name of a project so that it has climate or equity in it is going to get that project over the hump of being funded. But I think if you have a project that has the makings of really addressing an issue in the equity space or an issue in the climate space, I think going back and relooking that and perhaps expanding on it and expounding on it is going to be really critical to having that project be competitive.
Okay, thank you very much. And thanks for all the other information too.
Great. Okay. Well, I hope everybody has a great lunch and a great day.
Thank you, Marianne. We really appreciate you jumping on today.
No
Hope you have a
problem.
great rest of your day.
You too. Bye.